Union Partnership for Development for this project, with the hope that this project will help build the capacity of civil society organizations across Africa to ensure free, fair, transparent, and credible elections on the continent. You are welcome to this engagement, and let's have a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frederick. We'll receive some official remarks from our partners, and I'm honored to invite someone who loves Ghana and has invested so much in the democracy, good governance, electoral integrity. Anna is very passionate about the work she does, and if you meet her, you know that she enjoys the work, and we want her to know that Ghana is her home, and we thank you for the work that you do. So I will invite Anna Lezi. She is the head of governance sector, European Union delegation to Ghana, to give us a brief remarks. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much for your nice word. I'm feeling very much, more and more, very much at home here in Ghana, and this is my last year. This is going to be my last year, so I'm starting already. Like I am already in the mood of the one leaving the country, so suffering a bit. But I will keep my passion. Yes, I will keep it high. So my remarks, more than being real remarks, are a kind of collection of. A recollection of the support that the European Union is giving in Ghana to the country with the support of the civil society. So it's very pertinent, this the AED program and our cooperation with partnership democracy, which is here, and that I thank for us to address you with a few words. Because our support to the civil society is a big bulk of our work, the work of the European Union. Let's say in general terms, we work a lot with the civil society. In specific terms, in the democracy, in the strengthening of the democratic institution, and in cooperation with the CSO is very important, and AED gives exactly this an echo to this approach that we have in the country. So I would like just to recall some of the activities that the European Union is implementing in Ghana with the civil society, specifically because the civil society are a fundamental actor to strengthen the electoral integrity. So the European Union has been providing support to conduct a peaceful, credible and free and fair election in Ghana in the past 15 years. Now, in view of what are we going to do and what we are already doing in view of the election in 2024, there are different ways that we are using support for domestic election observation, civic education, inclusion and participation of women in the electoral process, and recently, thanks to a program which is based in our headquarters in Brussels. It is called the WIDE program, so Women and You in Democracy. And this project is a project also implemented by the partner that is here for the AED Africa, the European Partnership for Democracy. And through this project, we are now supporting the civic engagement through NCC and youth engagement through the Youth Leadership Parliament. So I will recall now a little an overview of what we will be deploying. Initially, we will have a EU election expert mission. Many of you in our debates in view of the electoral process ask us, the European Union, going to deploy an observation mission, as we did already in 2016 and in 2020. No, for the electoral process in 2024, we will not have an electoral observation mission. We will have an electoral election expert mission. So the election expert mission is a bit different. It will be a technical mission with the deployment of 2 independent experts, which will be deployed to the country for 2 months, and will be conducting support and assessment to the institutions involved in the electoral process, releasing a technical report and not a political one, in order to assess whether the electoral process is being conducted in line with international, regional and national obligations on the conduct of democratic election. The experts, after their mission, will be elaborating and releasing to the authority a final report with some recommendations. So it will be a complement to the electoral observation missions carried out by the EU in the previous year, which were followed up. You may remember last year we had a follow-up at the electoral observation mission of 2020, which identified to what extent the recommendation released by the electoral observation mission were being implemented in the country or not. And this opens me the possibility to mention what we have been doing and what we are doing with the support of the civil society to support the country to implement the recommendations. We have been and we are financing, CDD is our partner and IDEG is the other partner, supporting them to help the institutions in Ghana to implement recommendations released by the electoral observation mission. So we are very proud of the cooperation we have with CDD and IDEG in this framework, supporting the country to advance in the implementation of the recommendations of the electoral observation mission. This is labeled like electoral administration support. So we will have an election expert mission. We are currently supporting the election administrations through CDD and IDEG. Then there is another path, the third one, and the third one is the support giving to mobilize the Ghanaian electorate on the potential threats to the country democratic stability, peace and security that is always at stake when there are important electoral processes such as the 2024 presidential and parliamentary elections. So this is why we are supporting observation, domestic observation. So we will be supporting the deployment of 1,000 observers, the Civic Forum initiative, and this is done through a project which is implemented once again by the civil society, is IDEG. We will be supporting through this project to be implemented in implementation, sorry, because it started already, by IDEG, the peace messaging, the peace pact among the political parties and the political leaders, the civic education and youth engagement, and the support for local government reform. As I mentioned initially, we are also supporting the civic education, the involvement and the engagement of women in the political processes and in the election, and the youth. And this is done through 2 new projects that we have concluded in the previous weeks. One is with the National Commission for Civic Education, and is particularly targeting youth people in more vulnerable areas in the greater Accra areas. And the second one is the one that I mentioned before, and I'm glad that today in the activities it is foreseen the intervention of the Youth Leadership Parliament, so the Kobe Fabian, because we are supporting with them the development of an app, a mobile application for education, information, instruction, guidance and that will be used by youth and supporting the youth in participating in the democratic process as the elections are. There are another stream of support, and this the stream of support related to monitoring potential violence. These that are very frequently related in all countries in the world. We've seen also in the Western country, in the States. So is the violence that can be connected with electoral processes, and this program is called IMAM, is the Early Warning and Response Election Violence Monitoring Mitigation. Is a regional project, so implementing in the entire region by UNEP, which has already elaborated a very interesting list of hotspots in Ghana where more violence for many different reasons and indicators that were identified could take place. And finally, there is another regional project that we carry out in cooperation and supporting ECOWAS country, and is the EPSAO project. It's a regional project supporting the ECOWAS to prevent and manage conflict and security threats in West Africa. So I conclude here by saying that this list of interventions and actions that we carry out in the country gives the flavor of how much important it is for the European Union to support the democratic strengthening and to support peaceful, free, credible, transparent elections with the support of the civil society, because except for the election expert mission, all the rest of the activities that I mentioned are activities carried out through the CSO and with the support of the CSO, which is perfectly in line with this the two-day panels and event in which we are discussing the role that the civil society and the civic engagement through the civil society play to ensure the integrity of the electoral processes. So I conclude here, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I guess now you agree with me how much Anna is very passionate about the work she does. Thank you so much. I would like to invite the head of the ECOSOCC Secretariat, William Karum. Thank you all for coming. I know today has been very busy for you. You have to move from meeting to meeting, and you've made time for our side event, and we appreciate you. So we'll receive official remarks from ECOSOCC Secretariat.
Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, let me observe all protocol that has already been existing. And let me say good morning to all of you, especially the civil society players in the room who have been playing critical part in ensuring that we have a democratic process in place. Member states, one which is credible, transparent, and through citizens' engagement. I think the role of citizen is very fundamental in development processes across the spectrum, but specifically in relation to electioneering processes in Africa. It's very fundamental because this is the process where citizens determine the development trajectory. This is a process where citizens determine who will take them to the next level of their development. Sorry. I think I've been talking a lot. Sorry about it. Yeah. So like I was saying, the process of electioneering in the continent is very fundamental. And the role of citizen in determining elections outcome is very important. And like I said in previous engagement, election is not about the outcome, it's a process. And we want to ensure that at every given stage within that cycle, there is credibility, there is accountability. What our dear brother Andrew, they're trying to achieve out of this, we're looking at the aspects of institutions. And we're asking whether our institutions in Africa are resilient enough in terms of providing the kind of oversight that is expected of them. Are they accountable? Are these institutions transparent? Are they able to play that objective, neutral, transparent role that is expected of them? These are critical citizens asking, yes. And that is the reason why we are experiencing huge discontent, especially within the youthful generation. To say, we don't want to have an outcome of an election where you say this is the end, but we all know that the process has been flawed throughout. But we are going to be forced to accept whosoever is at the top or whosoever came first to be our leader. The question is whether citizens were fully engaged, whether this is the choice of the citizens before you then now said, I have the legitimacy and credibility to be able to lead. So these are critical questions, and that is the reason why citizens' engagement throughout the process of electioneering is very fundamental. The African Union have the ACDEC, which is an normative framework that provides guidelines as to how elections has to be conducted. In that particular normative framework, it also talks about credibility of institutions, the election management bodies, how credible they are, how transparent these bodies are. We want to have an institution that is able to play its role from an objective point of view, an institution that will create a level playing field for every player to be able to participate and feel comfortable in the process without necessarily thinking that somebody else somewhere has an advantage over them. We want an open platform. And therefore, as I conclude, citizens' roles are very important. And therefore, I want to call upon all of you as African citizens, all of us, as we play our part in electioneering processes, as we contribute to the development of our various societies, our communities, we should remember that we have a responsibility. That responsibility is to make this society a better place. Remember, when there is huge expression of discontent, it leads to conflicts and violence. Who are the most affected? It is the same citizens who are the most affected. Our children, our mothers, our fathers, the elderly, the disabled. The community is affected. And therefore, we need to be able to take preventive measure. And therefore, we cannot sit on the fence and think that the solution can come from the other side. We need to be on the table. We need to be part of the conversation. We need to work together so that we're able to find sustainable solution to some of the fundamental challenges that we are confronted with. And if we want to address the issue of unconstitutional changes of government, if we want to address the issue of the governance deficit in the continent, if we want to address the issue of corruption, if we want to address the issue of the mismanagement of our natural resources, then citizens have to be on the table of conversation, and issues related to integrity is very fundamental. We need to begin to demand for accountability, and at the same time we need to proffer a solution as to how we can make institutions and our leaders better in the best interest of our continent. I thank you.
Thank you, William. Okay, so we'll receive the final remarks from Andrew Songa. Andrew is the advisor, the regional advisor for AU engagement with EPD. Andrew.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good. I just wanted to check that we're all here. And you're still energized. I want to first begin by thanking you all for honoring our invitation on a Saturday. I know that's a bit of a big sacrifice because we have very hectic weeks that we go through, and you look forward to start your weekend in a relaxed manner. But I guess the presence here today is testament to the gravity and the importance of the conversation we want to have around electoral integrity and how it is valued by all of us. And maybe as I start my remarks, I have to begin by thanking both CDD-Ghana and now William as the Executive Secretary of the African Union Economic, Social and Cultural Council, because I feel they both serve as our hosts. CDD-Ghana obviously being a partner of the project we're about to launch and being the local partner was gracious enough to organize this particular event so that we can be able to unveil the project with you and really bring Ghanaian civil society on board. But then also ECOSOCC, because really we added with a very particular milestone for ECOSOCC. It is the 20th anniversary for ECOSOCC as a representative of citizens' perception, views and engagement platforms within the African Union, which I think is very significant. They've been here since the start of the week, holding commemorative events for that milestone, key to which was a citizens forum that just ended yesterday under the theme of democracy and institutional resilience, which is probably why you had William really emphasize the importance of resilient institutions and how citizens can contribute to that resilience. So we're very pleased and happy that we get to platform ourselves within that particular milestone, and so we're very thankful for that. I think maybe my first role in this remarks would be to unpack something. So we've said ahead Africa, ahead Africa, ahead Africa. My colleagues will take a deeper dive, but at least let me break down the acronym for now as the Action for Holistic Electoral Approach for Democracy, which is an approach that was instituted by the institution I represent, European Partnership for Democracy, as a way of boosting citizen engagement, as William was suggesting, adds to the process of elections. And there will be a more comprehensive presentation around the approach. But this project is a Pan-African initiative that does bring together a series of different organizations, particularly with the aim of strengthening electoral integrity throughout the electoral cycle through amplifying the role of citizen observation groups within the electoral cycle. Just to quickly run down the membership, you have two electoral support organizations, the European Partnership for Democracy and the Democracy Reporting International, DRI. And then we have representation of regional electoral observer networks. You have the African Electoral Network, AFIONET, that is represented by the partner organization, the Alliance for Financial Monitoring, ACFIM rather. Then you have the Electoral Support Network for Southern Africa, that is represented by the Zimbabwe Election Support Network, ZESN. You then have the Eastern Horn and Horn of Africa Electoral Observers Network, EHON, that is represented in the consortium by the Constitution and Reform Consortium, CRECO, from Kenya. And then you have the West African Election Observers Network, WAN, which is by its secretariat member, the CDD-Ghana. So coming together as this consortium forming Ahead Africa, the ambition is that we can make the role of citizen observer networks in boosting electoral integrity a continental endeavor. And to make it a continental endeavor, you need the building blocks of the regional economic communities that are represented by the observer networks I've mentioned. And so you will hear a bit later on how we intend to strengthen those networks, how we intend to connect those networks, and therefore constitute a continental platform of citizen solidarity around election integrity. But why does this then become relevant? It becomes relevant because of the context we are in at the moment. I think a lot of us who are engaged in the electoral governance sector are familiar with this common parlance that has emerged, that democracy is on trial, especially in light of the amount of elections that we've been facing we are going to face this year and also started facing last year. And it is not just an African phenomenon, it's a global phenomenon. I think we've all seen some of the public dissatisfaction that William referred to, particularly within the demographic of the youth, a detachment between political leadership and the people that they claim to lead, an erosion of legitimacy, not just of individual political leaders, but various democratic institutions. And when you come to Africa in particular, you've seen a very strong connection between the dissatisfaction of socio-economic factors and the undermining of the legitimacy of some political leaderships, some governments, and also the processes that grant them the legitimacy to lead. So very much we've seen the trend of unconstitutional changes of government that William referred to. The fact that due to a variety of contextual reasons, you find that people are beginning to seize power outside the concept of elections, outside the concept of seeking the mandate from the people. But also interestingly, along with that, some unexpected trends. The perception that some sections of the public in fact encourage some of those unconstitutional changes of government actions, that they are welcomed in a populist way because of that dissatisfaction with institutions that are supposed to be democratic institutions, but in the end fail to deliver the dividends of democracy as expected from the people, and therefore that frustration translates into almost an implicit acceptance that we can set aside these democratic institutions and get another parallel form of governance. But then also at the same time, there's been research and surveys that have indicated that in fact, what is being seen as a popular support for some of these unconstitutional changes of government is really not about a repudiation of democracy. It's about an expression of frustration that the supply side of democracy is not working, that some of the institutions that you expect to be the vanguards of democracy are not in fact delivering democracy and have been undermined by some of the examples William raised, corruption or misguided priorities within governance, and that's what we need to be able to correct. And so in focusing on questions about institutional resilience, we must then turn attention to the key pillars of electoral governance. We need to be able to focus on the quality and the status of our electoral management bodies and whether they're in fact able to deliver free, fair and credible elections. We have to look at institutions that deal with electoral disputes and assess and evaluate whether in the event disputes emerge, we have independent institutions that the public can trust to resolve some of these political disputes, some of these electoral disputes, and navigate societies into resolutions of the disputes without descending into violence, as we've seen, because part of the concerning trends we've also seen on the continent is that electoral outcomes become triggers for violence. They become triggers for instability within governments, and at the heart of that is the question of whether the public actually trust the institutions they have to resolve electoral disputes. But then also the question we have to ask ourselves in the context of the work we are proposing to do is very critically the fact that we've had in previous election cycles very strong input and investment from various stakeholders in observing elections, in observing the legal frameworks that govern elections, and recommendations being issued to improve these environments. But then the question becomes, what happens to these recommendations? What impact does it have in informing the electoral governance frameworks moving forward? And I think the concerning trend is, in fact, there's an increasing disconnect between how we move from one election to the next. I think those of you in the room who are involved in electoral observation will lay testament to the fact that a lot of the recommendations you issue sometimes go unheeded, and they, you could very much predict the fractures that will happen in the next election. And so the question then becomes, how do you enhance the import and the quality of the recommendations with regards to having a profound change on the policy and the institutional frameworks that govern elections. And so that becomes an issue that should be viewed collectively, that citizen observer groups have a role, our international partners in the observer groups have a role, but then at the same time, the regional economic communities and the continental bodies like the African Union also have a role. But then how do we create synergy, cohesion and coordination to make sure that everything we're recommending to improve electoral conditions on the ground in fact have a bearing on those who are responsible for instituting the necessary policy and legal reforms. But then very importantly, as I begin to close, is also our thinking and conceptualization of what it means to observe an election. So again, William emphasized on process rather than outcome. I think also in some contexts we have seen that the reality is we need to move beyond the fixation of what happens on an election day. So a lot of our observation initiatives and engagements are very much invested on what we see on a polling day, and not much use of what you see on a polling day can explain the entire lived experience of an election cycle. So you will find maybe the most orderly lines that you will want to see on an election day. Everybody will vote peacefully. Everybody will go home. And then the problem comes when we start counting the ballots, transmitting the results, and or announcing the results, of course. And so then, you begin to question whether our frameworks are invested in actually the true vulnerable spots of the elections. I remember, for example, I'm from Kenya, in my home country. Just a quick anecdotal example, 2017 was a very pivotal election for us. So we had a situation where, everybody voted dutifully, everybody voted peacefully and went home. The reports and observer missions came in thick and fast, including from the international community, essentially giving the election a clean bill of health. A dispute arose, and then lo and behold, the Supreme Court then went on to overturn the said election, highlighting significant failures on the part of the electoral management body with regards to adhering to what the legal framework said should be done with regards to transmission and announcement of results. And so I have to admit it was a bit of an awkward and embarrassing situation for some of us in the observer community, because you have to now backpedal with regards to some of the things that were said about the election. But it was a learning experience, and I'm happy to say, at least within the context of my country, it fundamentally changed the scope and the understanding of what it would mean to observe an election. But even outside that, it's also living up to the contemporary challenges that we are now seeing with regards to our electoral environment. And with regards to the Citizens Forum I mentioned, one of the things that came up in the deliberations over the last 2 days was the digital reality of our democracy and some of the challenges that it is now introducing, and whether we are really equipped as observer networks to be able to track and document some of these challenges. So technology has become a very big part of our elections. Are we alive to both the potentials and the challenges of technology within the context of our elections? Particularly even now, the notion of artificial intelligence and how it can play a part within the context of our elections. How it will be utilized perhaps to be able to anticipate voter registration patterns, how it will be utilized to anticipate the allocation of resources within an election, and the potential challenges that are inherently within that technology, how it can maybe lead to exclusion, how it can lead to discrimination. We have to be alive to these contemporary challenges if again we are to be relevant with regards to what our observation work does to boost electoral integrity. So that's what I hope we will be able to unpack with regards to what we are trying to do with the project. I think I'll just end by giving a quick overview of where we're going to go to next with regards to the conversations. We're going to get a keynote discussion that will reflect on the road ahead with regards to electoral integrity. The fact that Ghana is facing an election later in the year, it would be very interesting to see what kind of conversations and debates are informing the road to that election. Then we will unpack the key elements of the Ahead Africa project itself and how we deliberately intend to boost the corporates and with integrity, and then the conversation, engagement with youth in elections in this country, and what it would then do, kind of conversation that centers them and not tokenize or marginalize them within the context of this valuable notion we are trying to push around citizen integrity. Again, I thank you all for joining us, and I'm looking forward to a robust conversation and interrogation of the approach we want to lay out with this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. We would like to recognize some of our partners here. They've been very faithful to CDD-Ghana European Union programs. Anytime we call on them, they respond to us, so thank you for coming. We also have some students from University of Ghana. Okay, thank you. Fosda is here, William Yako, Africa Center for International Law Accountability. Kodio, our national coordinator, is also here, Mr. Ahin. Thank you for coming. I'll get the list of partners who are here and then we'll recognize them. Thank you. So at this point, we'll listen to our keynote presentation on reflecting on the road ahead. Andrew introduced it, and we couldn't have found anyone better to do this for us than our own Rumiao Shaibu. Let me say a brief about him, those who do not know him. He's the president of the West African Election Observers Network, WAYON, and a former acting co-chair of the Coalition of Election Observers, CODEO. He's an educationalist. He's also the spokesperson for the National Chief Imam. He's observed almost all the elections in Ghana, and he's observed elections in Kenya, Liberia, Nigeria. So a lot of ideas to share with us today. And he's also contributed to the development of Ghana by serving in various capacities on the board of some institutions. So he's also a board member of the National Peace Council of Ghana, which is very significant, I should mention. He has more than 3 decades of engagement in the media as educator of a variety of national, religious, and social issues. We can't have a conversation like this and not invite him to give us the keynote address. After his address, we'll have time to reflect on, because a lot of information we have received, and take some questions and answers as well. So, Sheikh, we would like to invite you to the podium. Let's give him a hand as he comes in.
Let me start on the existing protocol in my representation, and learning from the presenter from the AU Economic Office, and I was getting choked. We have an update that when you see your friend's beard catching fire, quickly find some water around you. But in my case, when you see your friend's beard catching fire, quickly shave. And good morning to all of you, and let me start on a note of commendation and appreciation for the invitation extended to me to come and deliver the keynote address on the topic reflecting on the road ahead, trends on citizens' observation to boost electoral integrity in Africa, and a focus on Ghana's 2024 general elections. The year 2024 is significant for global democracy, as many democracies are conducting elections. In Africa, about 19 countries are slated to hold their presidential and general elections this year, and about 2/3 of them are scheduled to happen in the last quarter of this year. Globally, elections are facing crucial challenges because leaders attempt to gain unfair advantages by limiting the political space and disrupting or undermining the electoral process. Within the context, the role of independent, non-partisan citizens election observer groups to ensure electoral integrity cannot be overemphasized. Genuine, functional, democratic elections are fundamental to right of citizens and indeed represent the practical expression of the people's sovereignty. Democratic constitution across nations globally, alongside human rights declarations from the United Nations, regional, intergovernmental bodies, and other blocs, support the principle of transparent and credible elections that accurately represents the will of the people. The preamble of the African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance states that member states seek to entrench in the constitution, in the continent, a political culture of change of power based on the holding of regular, free, fair, and transparent elections conducted by competent, independent, and impartial national electoral bodies. To give credence to elections in democratic countries, one of the significant democratic developments in the world is the non-partisan election observation by domestic election groups. According to the African Union, there is the need to enhance election observation missions in the role they play, particularly as they are an important contributory factor in ensuring the regularity, transparency, and credibility of elections. In the call to action by the Agenda 2063 by the African Union, the Union seeks to consolidate a democratic and people-centered Africa through the universal application of the normative framework of Africa governance architecture. And all elections on the continent are free, fair, and credible. Election observation, especially by domestic observer groups, reinforces citizens' rights to participate and ensure transparency of the electoral process. Ladies and gentlemen, this address focuses on how Africa citizens observation groups have evolved in their observation of election amidst the challenges associated with elections on the continent and how that can be replicated in Ghana for the upcoming elections. Trends in elections observations in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the wave of democracy that spread through the continent in the 1990s also brought the need for observers who would deliver impartial information on the electoral process and help increase transparency and accountability. This role was initially predominantly performed by international organizations, but with time, citizens saw the need to observe their elections, hence the birth of domestic or citizen observer groups, of which some are gathered here this morning. In certain countries, the democratic space has been significantly reduced. Political opponents and independent domestic observers face intimidation, as happened in Sierra Leone and Zimbabwe last year during their elections. Other issues affecting the electoral process, including vote buying, abuse of incumbency, unregulated campaign spending, irregularities in results management, and disinformation and misinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, despite these threats to democracy and elections, citizens observers have not relented in their mandate to promote free, fair, transparent, peaceful, and credible elections. Regional observation groups such as the Africa Election Observer Network, WION, the West Africa Election Observation Network, that's WION, in West Africa Sub-Region, East and North Africa Election Observers Network, EHON, in the East and North Africa Electoral Support Network of Southern Africa, that is ENSA, in Southern African Development Community, that is SADC region, and domestic election support networks such as the Zimbabwe Election Support Coalition of Domestic Election Observers in Ghana. YAGA Africa continues to offer a glimmer of hope to most African countries who resort to the polls as the only means of peaceful change of government. Although election process on the continent face challenges, observer groups seek to surmount these challenges to promote peaceful elections in Africa. In recent times, a significant improvement in the activities of domestic observer groups is the introduction of technology of election observation. Observer groups are now using sophisticated systems known as the Process and Result Verification for Transparency, that is PRVT, to observe elections on the continent. The PRVT uses sophisticated technologies to speed the observation effort to allow observers to report in near real time directly to a data center. Several African countries have increasingly adopted diverse technological solutions aimed at enhancing the efficiency and cost effectiveness of elections, while also bolstering trust among stakeholders throughout the entire electoral process. Citizen observation in Africa today has progressively introduced technological advancement like mobile application, social media platforms, and data analysis tools to bolster its efforts to enhance transparency and accountability and civic management. In Kenya, technological platforms such as the Ushahidi and the Mizalando Promise Tracker have been employed by citizens observation groups, where the former was used during Kenya's 2010, 2013, 2017, and 2022 elections to track misinformation and disinformation, and the latter is a parliamentary monitoring platform that tracks the performance of members of parliament in Kenya. Again, most CSOs in Africa have resorted to disseminating reports and findings through social media platforms to expand their outreach to the masses. The case study of Ghana's 2024 elections, and this is so critical because and it's important that this event is taking place around this time. We are I think less than 5 months away from our elections, and those of you who are in the country, the recent limited voter registration and the little violence that was encountered are all signs of the big things to happen if things are not handled very well. And the matters of integrity and credibility, as in the context of public trust and public perception about the integrity of elections, is something that will hold key to the success of our election this year. So we are in a critical moment, and this year's election is a so special and unique one, comes along with its own nuances, and all election observer groups, including all stakeholders, must be alive and aware of these so that we can stem the tide as it threatens to rise up. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to delve into Ghana's 2024 general elections and the role that observer groups have to play to ensure electoral integrity. Ghana remains a relatively stable democracy in Africa amidst a general decline in the quality of democracy on the continent. Ghana has held 8 successive elections largely peaceful and credible, a feat still uncommon in most countries on the African continent. Ghana's highly competitive multi-party elections have produced 3 electoral turnovers. Over the period, incremental electoral reforms, especially after the 2012 elections, have ensured improvement in the overall administration of the electoral process, particularly during the voting process on polling day for both the 2016 and 2020 elections. However, challenges remain and threaten credible and peaceful elections in 2024, as I have indicated. In the 2016 and 2020 elections, the hard work of the EC was undone by the chaotic results collation, transmission, announcement process. And I love the point that was made by my brother here. I mean, refers to for those of you who were during our elections, in the earlier part of the day of the polling day, the whole country was so peaceful. country, and every police station you had visited, there was virtually no incident. And sometimes you went there and you find the queue was not even long enough. I voted at a polling station where there was nobody, so I voted and I went away. But what happened at the time of transmission of results kept this country in a very terrible tension. Yeah, and it took God to get us off the brink. And almost every year it has been the case. We get in a very terrible tension situation, and sometimes we are amazed by how God helps us to really move, and then we escape the outbreak of violence in our country. So don't think that Ghana is just completely peaceful. We are aware that we have challenges which, if we don't handle very well, our country, like other countries, can also break into violence. The reason why the issue of integrity, as we have here, and I love the word that has been mentioned here, integrity of the election process that leads to the credibility of results. In the world, we all know disputed election results have given rise to violence. And we have had our case where we have in 8 months in our country, the whole country was held, stalled. Nothing was happening because we were engaging in an 8-month-long electoral result contestation in the court. Now, our last election, we still had to go to court. And the dangers we are confronted is that because there's so much suspicion in our system, Initially, the opposition said this time we will not go to court. I mean, it's a public knowledge. We will not go to court. So if we will not go to court, what is going to happen? This answer must come from our own minds. So that is why the issue of the integrity of our elections is so important. So how about the challenges remain threatening credible and peaceful election in 2024? In the 2016-2020 elections, the hard work of the EC was undone by a chaotic results, coalition, transmission and announcement process. In the 2020 elections, the chaos around the results, coalition process and the announcement led to the death of at least 5 persons. For us at the Peace Council, I think the number hovers between 5 and 8. 5 and 8, and it has never happened in the history of our country that just through elections we lose the precious lives of Ghanaian citizens, and something that the whole nation has expressed is revulsion, and we expect that it never happens in the history of our elections again. And that is why the integrity of our elections for us is very, very key and fundamental to the sustainable peace of our country. Because disputed elections, when it breaks up, it has also implications for peace and security. And so it's a very important thing for us. Making 2020 the deadliest election, if you like, on record in the 4th Republic. Another major challenge that has characterized Ghana's electoral system the last 2 elections in 2016 and 2020 elections has been the constant rise of misinformation and disinformation in the country. Shockingly, there has been reports of major political parties spending more on social media to either inform, disinform or misinform the public. According to a report published in 2019 by the University of Exeter, in 2016 general elections in Ghana, the new political party executed a collective and targeted social media campaign strategy, and has since maintained that structure to the extent by mid-2019 they had 700 people to do this bidding of the party on social media. In 2020 elections, Kodeyo, a renowned citizen observer group in Ghana, the group that I belong to, we have been engaged in this kind of business for quite a long time, and currently is the most authoritative domestic election observer group whose influence goes beyond the borders of Ghana. In Ghana, experienced direct misinformation and disinformation on its share was targeted viciously online. I mean, the chair is myself. I was then the acting co-chair, and I had to, by our arrangement, I'm the one who should read the result of our PVT, the parallel voter tabulation, which is one of the technologies we have used using statistical approach to be able to present results by which we try to compare what we have been able to get by way of our random observations with what the Electoral Commission, and we have done so over the years for 2012, 2016, and 2020 we have done this. But I suffered serious backlash when I read our results of the PVT to confirm the results of the EC. The opposition targeted me, seriously, for public opprobrium and insults. But that is the price you have to pay if you want to do some good work for your country. So we are still in the business, and we will keep our eyes on the integrity of our elections. If you win the election, genuinely, we'll announce it. Genuinely, if you win the election, we'll announce it. If you lose it, we'll announce it. That's our business, and we take the risk for doing that. Again, in 2020 elections, Kodeyo, a renowned assassin group in Ghana, experienced direct misinformation and disinformation when its chair was attacked viciously online. With these past experiences, the 55% plus youth voters and the prospect of adding 2 million or more new voters by the EC suggests parties will increase their spending on social media and also likely to use misinformation and disinformation to discredit parties, candidates, and policies. This is a reality we are living with, and they've never taken joke of it. People have been prepared. They are being taught the technology. How to target, disrupt the process by which we announce results, and so on and so forth. There is also the possibility of external players interfering in parties, in Ghana's politics through information disorder, given the uncertainties of platform owners, removing harmful content from the media. Then there is also the issue of ineffective campaign financing laws and unregulated campaign spending. An exploratory study carried out by CDD-Ghana in 2022 revealed that the cost of running for parliament in Ghana is estimated at 4 million strong Ghana cedis. And it has implication for the credibility of our elections, and it has implication also for our fight against corruption. Election then becomes an investment, and it is the advantage of the highest bidder. It's not so much more about conscience and what it means for one to engage in election. It's not so much about the sovereignty, God-given sovereignty that we give onto another person through our elections. And I think that is one of the things that we want to do, that the observer groups must also engage citizens and create the consciousness about the why of election and not the how of election. There is one thing, the how of election, and there's another thing, the why of election. Why citizens must vote, why the citizens should not take money for voting, is something that we need to fight in the mindset. But it has become virtually a norm, and there is no shame in taking money in order to vote. There are those who will offer the money and tell you to take an oath. Take an oath. If it's a Muslim, he gives you the Quran. I'm giving you the money, so swear that you are taking the money, you will vote for me. If you're a Christian, probably the cross in the Bible will also be the case. If you're a traditionalist, the Antoine Yama is there. So he says, swear that I'm giving you money. So it's not about even your conscience about what you are doing to help the country. So spending 4 million Ghana cedis coming to 693,000 durable American dollars, that's 59% increase in the 2012 and 2016, whereas a shot at the presidency is estimated at 575 strong million Ghana cedis. 575 million. And still the spending is going on. Yeah. And by estimate, maybe about $100 million. These statistics and figures have become increasingly a matter of concern as we approach the 2024 elections, primarily due to the significant rise in inflation observed in recent years. These escalating costs pose a potential challenge, particularly if campaign financing is not adequately addressed. Vote buying is also another challenge to the integrity of elections in Ghana. Citizens are lured to vote for political parties with monetary incentives. The saddest aspect of the situation is that it is done openly and people are not prosecuted. Indeed, one of the concerns that I quickly want to add, the registration of underage citizens. And it's a matter of serious concern because I cannot see the honesty of a politician who wants to hold an office on the foundation of integrity that he encourages an underage citizen to go and vote or to get registered. Now what you do to our young people? The young man is less than 18 years and you encourage him to go and vote. So in the first place, you introduce him into a life of dishonesty. He cannot be an honest citizen of our country. And these are the young people who are growing, want to hold offices in future in our country. They want to become the president, they want to become the MPs. And yet from the first part of their life, they have been encouraged by political elite. Even when they don't qualify to be registered, they have been registered. And they feel encouraged to do that. And so it's one of the challenges. We have a challenge of even how to determine the age of a citizen who is going to vote, and even the issue of nationality. Because there must be a population, the voter population must be determined in every country, and we have to know that in the light of the general population to know how many people are qualified to vote in our country. But if we cannot even determine the nationality of such people, we don't have effective way to determine that, then it means that we open the door for so many other things to happen. And so it's one of the challenges that I hope that citizens observer groups could take on board for discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, how do we as CSOs address these challenges to promote electoral integrity in the country? As regards the chaotic transmission of results, CDD-Ghana and CODEO are advocating for the country to benefit from technology through electoral transmission of election results from the polling station to the website of the Electoral Commission, as it has been done in countries like Kenya and Nigeria. It seeks to advocate for transmission of results of the polling station to be transmitted to a dedicated website of the EC to be viewed by all citizens. But that will also add to the transparency aspect, and with transparency we can guarantee credibility and integrity. On misinformation and disinformation, some CSOs such as the Media Foundation for West Africa, the Dubawa, the Pemplas Byte, are working to fact-check information shared on social media and the related platforms. In the context of the 2024 general elections, CODEO and Pemplas Byte seek to collaborate to expand the incident desk to fact-check and verify information through CODEO observers on the field. On campaign financing and vote buying, CDD-Ghana, Ghana Integrity Initiative and other CSOs are advocating for a well-regulated campaign funding. In promoting the electoral integrity of the elections in Ghana, CODEO seeks to deploy, as usual, about 4,000 observers across the country to observe the elections. It will also rely on the PRVT to assess the quality of the electoral process and outcomes of the election day. Let me end up with the following recommendations. Ladies and gentlemen, although election observers are working hard to improve electoral systems in Africa, there are still gaps that thwart electoral integrity. The challenges faced in Ghana's electoral system are not peculiar to the country, but reflect the happenings in other African countries. To promote electoral integrity in the region, I urge all observer groups to 1. Effectively seek electoral reform through their observation reports. During election observation, observer groups make recommendations on how to improve the electoral process. I believe these recommendations should not be kept on the shelves to gather dust, but be pursued and engaged with major stakeholders to promote electoral integrity. Observer groups are to devise means to address misinformation and disinformation during election periods. That is right from the registration to voting, to prevent any uprising which may further cause conflicts. The use of misinformation and disinformation to gain unfair political advantage has become the go-to for most political parties and a canker invading most African countries. This has been complemented by the introduction of the use of the AI, artificial intelligence, which has made it easier to falsify information and spread it. A study carried out by the Africa Center for Strategic Studies pinpoints 39 recorded African countries being the target of a specific disinformation campaign, with greater levels of disinformation in Africa countries experiencing conflicts. 3. A step further should be advocating for legal framework that facilitate access to information and partnerships to ensure data and translate it for the diverse communities. These efforts will not only empower citizens with knowledge, but also strengthen democratic values while presenting a combatant front to some of these challenges. CSOs should promote voter awareness and participation by intensifying their engagement with the electorate. Citizens' engagement should not only be at the elite level, but much attention should also be given to the grassroots. That's the one that I mentioned earlier on, that if the grassroots really appreciate and understand their civic responsibility as voters, and they can vote on their conscience, then we are sure to have an election that is credible. Observer groups should effectively assess and evaluate the pre-electoral environment to identify the early warning signs for stakeholders to address them. The Ahead Africa project is an initiative to promote the integrity of elections in Africa. In the implementation of this project, attention should also be paid to the needs and the challenges of citizen observation groups, and devise strategic plans which align with such needs to help promote election integrity in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, election is a process and not an event. Therefore, the credibility of elections cannot just be premised on events of the election day. For observer groups to assess the integrity of elections, they must consider the electoral activities in the pre-election, election, and post-election phases. Despite the efforts to improve the transparency and credibility of elections in Africa, there are still gaps that still need to be filled. The role of domestic election observers groups in promoting the integrity and electoral system cannot be overemphasized. They continue to play a pivotal role in promoting peaceful elections on the continent by monitoring polling stations, documenting irregularities, and ensuring transparency in electoral processes. This brings me to the end of my presentation, and thank you so much for your attention.
Can we do it again?
Thank you so much. This side event is brought to you by CDD-Ghana, European Partnership for Democracy, WAYAN, and co-funded by the European Union. We will take some of your comments. I think we have about 10 minutes. Yes, so either direct 5. There are some. Okay, so let's see how it goes. Then, so you can direct it to Sheikh or Andrew about the project, even though we are going to have a bigger conversation about the AHEAD project itself. So we'll give you the floor. Who's going first? Okay, so okay, can I see your hand? Keep your hand up. Okay.
So my question is to, I think Anna or Alexis. I don't know. Alex, okay. In her presentation, she spoke about the EU doing a transition. That is, they are no longer going to do election observation mission, but they are going to have electoral expert mission. I want to know what informed that particular transition. And then secondly, in Ghana, there are hotspots on election days. There are constituencies in Greater Accra like Ashiaman, Ewutu Senya East, and the rest. I want to know what the EU and their support for Ghana in this year's election, what they are going to do to actually combat any electoral violence on election day. Thank you.
I think at a point I'll invite Joseph to come sit here too. I'll come to you. Okay.
Yeah. Mine is a contribution I want to make. And I'm speaking from the point of view of the fact that I was with the EC as Director of Elections for about 30 years. I'm retired now, but I'm with CODEO as a national coordinator. And just this morning when I was coming to this function, I sat in an Uber. Here I'm talking about misinformation and disinformation. There was an item on elections, and the Uber driver was saying that it's a foregone conclusion that the EC was going to rig this year's election. Whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. So I sat at the back of the vehicle, and I felt I needed to educate the taxi driver on certain issues. I tried my best, told him I had worked with the EC for some time, and he would just not budge. A very nice atmosphere to put in. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Maoli Dake. Just 2 quick points. I think that from the conversations so far, we seem to be expecting more from election observation, election observers that they are probably designed to deliver. In an election process, there are different actors, stakeholders with different roles. So for instance, there's no way, in the case of the Kenyan situation, there's no way, for instance, whether local or international electoral observers, after a day of voting, can determine whether the election meets the constitutional yardstick, standards, requirements, for instance. There may be some obvious ones that you can see, but that is the role of a constitutional court responsible for that. So obviously, if your observations indicate otherwise and a court determines otherwise, it doesn't necessarily undermine the work you do, and it shouldn't compel us to want to expand the role of electoral observers. And our keynote speaker also spoke a bit to that, about how electoral observers have to be more interested in other aspects of the election. But I think that we should educate our people to appreciate what election observers are, so that we don't necessarily try to take over the role of other actors in the electoral process. The second point I want to make is the case of Ghana, for instance. We've had a situation where things happen that obviously show that, okay, we are undermining the institutions or the process, and we don't say anything, and then when the inevitable outcome happens, then everybody complains. The issue about the current level of mistrust is probably at the highest in the electoral. The agency responsible, the EC, is not out of vacuum. It's not out of ignorance that we just have to educate the people. There are things, practical things happening every day. If you appoint an obvious partisan activist to an independent body like Electoral Commission, that is something that people can see. And there's no amount of disinformation or re-information that can disabuse their mind. So there are obvious things happening that people are saying, that they can use their own judgment to say that, okay, this cannot contribute to a free and fair election. So those are the things that we should be dealing with. It's not because people are ignorant. It's not necessarily because all these are due to disinformation. We have to be honest with ourselves and address and confront some of these things. And these things are done by people with responsibility. We should address some of these issues before we get to election day. Let us not wait, because it may be too late.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So because some are comments, we can take 2 more. Let's
Thank you so much. My name is Johannes Awono. I represent Youth Park Organization. My question is more centered on the youth, and it goes to Sheikh. I was very interested when you gave he's asking questions. Where is the money? How do I make sure that I recoup this investment? And I strongly believe this is linked to something that has to do with corruption when they also come into power, because again, they have to recoup the money. For we the young people who are interested in ensuring that there is peace in the country, ensuring that or would want to delve into politics, what do we do? How do we make sure that, because from the look of things, it looks like this is a business on its own and it comes with the risks associated with it. How can we ensure that people can go into politics so that it's not so capital intensive, such that the idea is that I need to recoup my money, I need to go and pay back the loan I've taken, I need to make sure that investment that has gone down the drain is being recouped. Thank you so much.
The gentleman at the back, then we can close the first session.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Kosamo. My first concern is how do we regulate media houses from transmitting results, because you realize that most of the owners of these media houses are politicians, those who are behind it. And you realize that most of them are giving live coverage of whatever election results is being telecast out there. So depending on the media house and their affiliation, you realize that they have their own different results that they telecast. And that alone can position people to think that our party is winning, and at the end of the day, it doesn't correspond with the results that Electoral Commission is having. Because maybe if you are from TV3 or Metro TV or whichever media house they belong to, they have their own results. And one aspect of it is that they always like to go to the strongholds of the party that they support to be telecasting results from that side. So when the opponents feel like, oh, we are trending, like we have more numbers than the others, it has sunk into the minds of party followers to feel like, oh, we are leading. However it is, there's no way the opponent can come and oversee or supersede us. That's one aspect of it. Our challenge is also about information management. people are out there, once they just get information from one angle, they go about spreading it without trying to authenticate whether it is verified, whether it is true, whether it's authentic or not. And if you look at statistics have shown that most of Ghanaians take their source of information from WhatsApp platform, from social media platforms and all those things. So how can we rely on such kind of information to be spreading fake news? That's one aspect of it. I think we can make reference to last time elections. Election results was changed almost like 6 times, allegedly. I'm conscious about what I say. So the question is, how will I place a trust and credibility to a result that has effected change several times?
Okay.
And if you are electoral commissioner or you are working with the election management board, you are like a mediator, you are like a referee. Don't allow any key stakeholders who are supposed to participate in IPAC meetings feel like, okay, my voice is not being heard because I don't agree with you. Let's assume that you are the major 2 political parties in Ghana. Once one of them decide to say that because of your actions and inactions, I'm not interested to participate in that IPAC meeting, it calls for scrutiny. Okay. The game of politics is when it's very competitive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think at a point we'll invite Jerry to respond to some of the questions. So you want to go first?
Yeah, I think I'll go first and then cede to you, and then because most of the questions went to Sheikh, he can finish off with a question. I think I just have 2 brief responses or remarks to make in regards to what's been said in the plenary. And starting with you, Mr. Ake, I agree entirely that we shouldn't be molding electoral observation into roles that are not traditionally theirs. So by no means would I be suggesting, for example, that electoral observers are adjudicators of electoral disputes. I think what I just hope to underscore is something even Sheikh raised it in his remarks. Remember, we have a pre-electoral environment, an electoral environment, and a post-electoral environment. And I guess the emphasis I was trying to make is, as you go into the window of observation, how much of it is informed by the environmental factors leading into that election. So, for example, you would hope that a comprehensive assessment has been done with regards to what's been done to prepare for that election, so that when you are able to track concerning elements like maybe inconsistencies in voter registration, inconsistencies in how technology is procured and deployed into that election, then maybe you begin to see the ingredients of what a dispute will look like after the election. And that should form the frame of analysis of the kind of observation you're doing, so that it doesn't feel from the public that it comes out of the blue, that you gave an election a clean bill of health of being free, fair, and credible, and then suddenly a dispute emerges and all these ingredients emerge as undermining that election. So it's about the frame of analysis of the pre-electoral, electoral, and post-electoral conditions. And then very related to that, I think, are the sentiments around, the mistrust, the misinformation, disinformation. I think for me, the brief thing I can say in relation to that is there is responsibility that is incumbent on the mandate holders, like electoral management bodies, to invest in confidence-building measures that allow different stakeholders to begin to invest in trusting the process and also communicating that trust to the public. So what are some of these confidence-building measures? It's about transparency in some of the very critical processes. Let's not allow controversies to emerge out of a lack of outflow of information. And I can give maybe a few quick examples of where some of these controversies emerge. You scrutinize a voter's register, and then it becomes very difficult to explain or distribute the outcome of that scrutiny. You already begin to raise questions, because people say you audited the voter's register. What was the outcome? If you have opposition political parties beginning to say we don't have access to the audit of the register, we have not been given information as the law requires, already that begins to inspire some conspiracy theories or worries within the public. If you have citizen observer groups that are engaged in trying to monitor things like electoral registration, and they have issues they want to raise with the electoral management bodies, but that then there's no forum to allow for that exchange or communication between the electoral management bodies and other stakeholders, that increases controversy again. But if there's timely information flow from electoral management bodies where they highlight with every milestone what they're doing, what they've achieved, there's invitation of different stakeholders to intervene and allay their advanced concerns, there is open conversation around reform, maybe in between elections. Those are the confidence building measures that can begin to build trust and also filter out the potential of misinformation or disinformation. Yeah, I think I'll stop at that for now.
Yes, in relation to the question was, so in relation to the decision to move from an electoral observation mission to an election expert mission, there are various elements and considerations which were taken into account, including the fact that Ghana, who has been consistently requesting and inviting the previous electoral observation mission, didn't release an invitation. You know that you need an invitation for carrying out an electoral observation mission. But other elements which were taken into account are the limited impact of the previous electoral observation mission with the recommendation released and the partial implementation of the recommendation, the big amount of electoral process and the limited funds available for the electoral processes in 2024. So all these elements and consideration brought to consider the opportunity to support domestic election observation, which we are doing through, and we will be doing through the CDD. So these are some of the and the expert missions at technical level that can contribute. As for the security and the identification, the EU intervenes more in the pre-electoral environment. In the pre-electoral environment, supporting all those mechanisms which can allow to identify those particularly hot spots in order to put in place preventive measures, but not in the day of the election, because in the day of the election are the authorities. You know that there is a security force chaired by all the security actors, the police, the fire brigade, the ambulance, led by the Electoral Commission. So it's not the European Union who can deploy anything on the day of the election. Everything is done preventively with the two instruments that I said, with the two actions that I mentioned before, including the EPSAO, which will reinforce both the civil society-led early warning and preventive mechanism, and the one done supporting the national early warning system. So.
Okay, and to add on, we have funding from European Union to implement some of the reforms. So we have some key reform actions that CDD is leading with partners, IDEC, engaging. So more on taking an active responsibility to look at some of these recommendations even before we go into elections. So these are some of the, I'm sure when we, okay, yes sir.
The European Union is teaming up with the CDD, for example, to look at the results management system of the EC. You remember during the last election, somebody just said here that there were 6 election results that came up. The transmission wasn't smooth enough. The electoral commissioner herself had to be correcting issues here and there. So what is happening is that, what do we do in future to prevent such occurrence? For example, if the electoral commissioner says that she made a mistake in saying that the result was 122 instead of maybe 125, do we just take it in the face value of it? Do we record it? And what do we do to convince the stakeholders that a genuine mistake was made at the polling station level, at the constituency level, and do we have records of that? That is what CDD and EU is doing, maybe even before the election or after. So that at the end of the day, when somebody makes a mistake like the commissioner did some time back, there will be records to show that this mistake was made, this was a corrective measure taken. It's like going to the bank and then you make a mistake in your check. The check here being the result of the election. What do? Do you sign at the top and you record it? What do? Do you give it to the participants? I mean the parties. For example, there are agents who are there. They have to be a witness to the correction that was made. What are the polling station? At the constituency? This is what CODEO is teaming up with the European Union to do. There are other measures that are also being taken into account. And at the appropriate time, we'll be meeting with the political parties and other.
Okay, and I know I first also supporting them with the dashboard so that it will be a bit more transparency in the system to project the result.
Good. Thank you. A very good point was made, which is one of part of the concerns that we have as election observers, and in fact, even as good citizens of this country. The appointment of commissioners that have party affiliations. Already, the electoral environment and the political environment is toxic with suspicion. So appointing a commissioner with party affiliation exacerbates and give credence to the suspicion that people have. But the appointment has already been made, and those people are there. What do we do? That's where the issue of vigilance, comes in. And citizens observer groups then will have to adopt a means by which we are able to really keep eye on every level of the process. And in this particular case, our objective is to prevent fraud and ensure the integrity of the process, so that we neutralize even the presence of the one. Yeah. But I can understand when you do that, even when you make a genuine mistake, those who feel disadvantaged by that mistake will never take it as a genuine mistake. They consider it as something deliberate. And that's why we need to really be very, very careful about this. Now, going forward, I think we must press on for constitutional reform that reduces the appointing power of the president. Because the president has been given the power, and if he decides, he appoints. And we do not have the mandate to really take the people away. So CODEO raised concerns, we condemned it. In fact, we also recommended to those so appointed to resign. That was public. Yeah, we spoke in the stronger terms that it really affects the integrity, the impartiality of the Electoral Commission. And I think that is something important. And further to that also, even the appointment of the EC's chairperson is something that must be looked at again. The mode and the process of appointment. Because when the NDC was in power, the president appointed Charlotte Osei. And the then MPP in opposition then never trusted. Now she's removed, and then the change comes. Now the MPP also appoints Jean, and then now the NDC in opposition says we will never trust her. So what do we do to ensure that there is an established standard or procedure that we all agree that this is the way, in case there's a vacant position of the chair, how do we appoint in such a way that it will be something acceptable and get approval of all citizens? I think it's so important for the integrity. If we fail to do so, then we have to live with this kind of suspicion. And that's why the biggest opposition party now still continue to express their suspicion. The issue of this transmission of result is very important. And you will notice even in the transmission of the results of the limited voter registration, learning from what happened in 2020, I thought the EC would have been more meticulous. Those mistakes could be genuine mistakes. But once they have reasons to doubt the integrity, then they make it as if it was a deliberate attempt, now to do it in such a way that it will favor the incumbent. And so there must be some engagement also with the EC, still whilst respecting the mandate of the EC, but we must draw a line between the mandate of the EC and the balance between EC and then the consensus that we need around certain very key decisions that we take, so that together we are able to work together. 575 million, what it means is that if the one who invests this colossal sum of amount to win election, definitely this money must be plowed back. And it has implications for our fight against corruption. And corruption is one of the major things which is undermining even our effort to maintain our peace and security. And so it's really terrible. But to the one who loses, and with this investment, that's why election for us is becoming a do or die affair. Because in other words, I cannot spend this colossal sum and lose election. That's what is happening. And so this comes to the youth. The youth, I keep on telling the young people, the future of this country belongs to you. At my age, I don't know who is of my, is anyone who's older than me here? I don't know who, so older than me. I'm moving towards 70, not yet 70. Yeah. Oh, so there's a 75 person here. Oh, so that's my elder sister. Yeah. Oh, the 71 is also here. Okay, I'm not 70 yet, but let's put ourselves in this bracket. If we are around 70, 80, what else do we have would want to live for this country again? What else? That's why we are mindful of the kind of generation that we leave behind and the kind of country that we leave behind. So you need to be very mindful of the political class and what they do to your minds. That's why I made a reference. If you are a young person and the political elite, somebody who is about 75 years in politics, you are less than 18 years. He gives you money to go and register. You know what he has done to your life? Then what he has done to your life. And he is unconscious of the harm he's doing to you as a person and to the nation. He's unconscious. But for the politicians, power is the ultimate. Within the 8 years, power is the ultimate. So I want to encourage the youth to also neutralize this by trying to use this same technology and form groups that you want to really promote true and functional citizenry, that you are aware and conscious that you could become the next parliamentarian, you could become the next president of this country. So if you support us to create problems, we will die and go and leave you with a problem to solve. So you must be conscious of this, that the politicians should not manipulate your mind, even in those that are engaged in violence. That the politician uses money to reduce you from being a human being to a tool of violence against political opponent. You are a human being. You are a human being. Why is there somebody using money to make you a tool? Don't you understand this? And how much of our young people do understand this? And so, the young people, please, the future of Ghana belongs to you, and be careful about the kind of politicians we have in modern day times. You must depart from that. The integrity of our elections, in fact, should not be left in the hands of the politicians. It is not for them, and for them, by all means, they want to win an election. So the issue of integrity for them is only when it's to their disadvantage that they cry. If it runs to their advantage, they cry loud. But if it works to their advantage, they keep silent about it. And that's why the integrity is for us as citizens and for the EMB, the Electoral Commission, to really get a very, very, very credible, election management body that helps us to be able to go through. And I think that these are the few points that. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Let's give it to them. Let's give them a hand. You could kindly take your seat. We'll have a short video and then we'll take a coffee break and then we'll come back for the next session. I think our coffee is getting, the coffee break It's just so I.
understand our project and why we're here today. So I had sense for action for holistic management bodies, but also to civil society and all the actors that works in the electoral processes and cycles, not only on the election day, but before and after. Without going into many details, our project groups different networks. And the reason why we have decided to work with networks is that they group, of course, different. We've seen that these networks are based both in West, East, Southern Africa, and then they are grouped together in an umbrella organization called AfioNet at continental level. The reason why is that we wanted to support existing network on the continent. We didn't want to establish anything else already on elections. And together with them, we want to pilot this approach, which mainly means not working on elections only on election observation, but especially on electoral reforms. So in our project, we will of course support civil society organizations, and we are trying to fill the gaps of donors, but also other actors that are not following up not only on the recommendation, but also on the funding of civil society organizations that cannot carry out with their advocacy. Another point that I want to make, so we're trying to engage at 3 levels. So we will start on in countries that do have elections this year, but we are also started working in countries where there have elections in the next 2 years. Because we want to be present there way before the election days. So our engagement will be a national level, of course, and our partners, the different networks, WION, which we have here today, represented by CDD-Ghana and Joseph here, will engage at regional level with the different regional economic communities, and then, of course, at continental level with the African Union. And my last remark, and of course if there are further curiosity, we're happy to take some questions, but not many, because in the interest of time, is civic tech and elections. So we'll explore also the role of technology and how this influence or can help electoral integrity. And I will actually leave my colleague Fatou here from Affectivist, who will lead this component of the project to give you some details. But first, Joseph, I think it would be better if you could speak about what WION will do before we go to the technical part and civic tech, just in a few minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Joseph Otifrempon from CDD-Ghana. I'm the programs officer. So normally when we talk about elections, the institution Cordio comes to mind, especially when you're in Ghana. But within CDD-Ghana, we have the secretariat also for WION. That's the West African Election Observation Network, of which Cordio is an organization. So this AHEAD project is being implemented by WION. And I'm going to speak for a few minutes. So the focus will be just an introduction of what WION is, what we do. Then I'll delve into the AHEAD project and the role that WION is going to play. So when we talk of WION, WION is the West Africa Election Observers Network, and it was established in the year 2010 under the auspices of CDD-Ghana. So the secretariat of WION is in Accra. It is an independent, non-partisan, non-governmental, non-religious network of election observation groups across West Africa, or the ECOWAS region. And the purpose of forming WION is to promote free, fair, transparent, peaceful, and credible elections within the West Africa region. Currently, we operate in 13 West African countries, with the exception of Cape Verde and Guinea-Bissau. We don't have representatives there. We are working to get through Wademos and Afrobarometer. So we hope to get representatives from those countries. This is our structure. We have the General Assembly, which is made up of all the members from these 13 West African countries, the organizations. Basically, we deal with election observation groups. So the General Assembly, all the members are part of it. Then we have the Executive Council. It is the General Assembly that elects the Executive Council. So for the Executive Council, we have 7 members, and we have the chairman and 2 vice chairmen. That's 1 for Francophone and 1 for Anglophone. And currently our chairman is based in Sierra Leone. And Sheikh Aramiao is the 2nd vice for Anglophone. Then we have the secretariat. Under the secretariat, we have the project director, we have the project manager, project officer, then the communications team. Since its establishment, WION has worked across West Africa, and this is our capacity statement. In 2019 and 2021, WION built the capacity of its network members to help them to observe elections and also mitigate misinformation and disinformation in elections. In 2017, we supported the NDI team to provide technical assistance for the elections in Liberia. We have also collaborated with NDI to take research to look at the status of ratification and implementation of the AU Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance across 15 ECOWAS countries. We have also partnered with NDI and NED, and we have developed various field guides that provides the guidelines for election observation across West Africa. And in July and August 2022, we collaborated with ELOG from Kenya, and we trained about 20 young observers across West Africa, and we gave them the observation practicality by observing the Kenya 2022 elections. So under the AHEAD project, what does WION seek to do? Under this project, basically, WION is undertaking 3 major activities. The whole of the AHEAD project, we have 4 clusters, but we are mostly focusing on 3. And the first one is capacity and learning. So under capacity and learning, we want to train election observers across West Africa to give them the guidelines of how to observe elections, political campaign financing, and the various activities that are related to election observation. So this program we have already started. It's scheduled to start in August. That's the last week of August. We are training around 28 observers across West Africa to give them the basis of election observation through observing electoral processes. Aside from that, under the capacity building, we also want to have exchange learning in countries that are holding elections. So since we have members in 13 West African countries, when any of them is holding elections, we will try get some of these our members, we see what they are going through, and we share experience from what we have also observed in other countries across the world to help them to conduct credible elections. The second activity that WION will undertake is knowledge production and monitoring. So usually when we observe elections, we write reports, and mostly that's the end. So this time around, WION has taken it upon itself to do a stock taking of the electoral recommendations that election observer groups make during the observation. And once we conduct that research and we know the various recommendations that you have made, then we will try and link up with our organizations within the countries where we have problems. Then we seek to let them advocate for electoral reforms around those areas. Then there's a third activity, that's the collaboration and networking. Under that, we want to structure WION to the extent that it will be more powerful within the West Africa sub-region, so that we will be able to collaborate with the regional organization, that's ECOWAS, to promote electoral integrity. So under that, we have to constitute our executive council and also expand our network to countries where we don't have representatives, such as Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. So we have taken it upon ourselves. We are doing scoping within countries where we don't have members, and countries where we even have just a member, we want to expand. Another strategy we are using is that there are some civil societies that are not election focused, but they do help in election related activities. For instance, in Nigeria, they have Yaga Africa, and it has been conducting election observation in Nigeria. So these CSOs, we want to bring them to achieve what we want to achieve, that's electoral integrity. And we have a strategic plan, and through this project, we want to review it and situate it within the current context within West Africa to help us to champion the aim of the project, that's to promote electoral integrity. So all that I said, this is the activity plan to achieve whatever I've spoken about. So I talked about the 4 clusters. Yeah, so we are taking the first 3. And the 4th one we will also contribute, but that's not the main plan. So under cluster 1, that's the capacity and learning. Cluster 2, we have the production, knowledge production and monitoring. And cluster 3, we have the collaboration and networking. So under cluster 1, you'll find the capacity building of election observers, institutional strengthening, and all that. So all these activities that we have grouped them into clusters. How is WION going to contribute to this project? You will conduct election observation, you will train young professionals in election observation, then after all, what? How do you contribute to the Ahead Africa project? Through our networking, we want to leverage on our members' expertise to ensure the implementation of electoral reforms within West African sub-region. So we already have groups in these countries. We will leverage up their expertise to advocate for electoral reforms across West Africa. And we will use our network to provide international support or synergy to impact positively on elections in Africa. We did it in Senegal. Before that's the pre-election stage, we sent a representative who joined our Wademos network to do the pre-election assessment. And we also want to facilitate the standardization of electoral norms across Africa by pursuing electoral reforms based on observation reports. You can't advocate for something that is not based on research. So the reports that we develop, we want to advocate for it by standardizing electoral norms within the West African sub-region. Well, we also help to achieve the purpose of the Ahead project by promoting best electoral practices through exchange learning programs. 15 different countries in the ECOWAS region with different political dynamics. So whenever we meet, we have to share the experience in terms of election observation from the various countries, so that where we identify gaps, we will know where to fill it. And we also want to train election observers for the next generation. So that's a contribution for electoral integrity. When these observers know the rules of election observation and the various manuals, they will be able to advocate for electoral integrity in the region. And this project also seeks to strengthen coordination among election observation groups. Usually, even within a country, there can be 2 or 3 election observation groups who may be operating in silos. But through WION, we want to bring all these together so that you have one voice to advocate for electoral integrity in West Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. If I may ask the audience to use your headphones, because Fatou will speak in French. Thank you. I believe English is channel 2. Do you want headphones? Oh, channel 1, sorry, channel 1. All right, I believe everyone is ready. Over to, je tiens la parole, Fatou.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Fatou et je travaille à Afrique TV, une organisation membre du consortium qui va mettre en œuvre le projet Ahead Africa. Donc, je suis là pour vous dire de façon rapide les activités que notre organisation compte mener dans le cadre de ce projet. Mais avant, j'aimerais vous faire une petite présentation de notre organisation. Africtivist est une organisation panafricaine basée à Dakar. Elle a été créée en 2015 et nous sommes pratiquement dans tous les pays de l'Afrique à travers nos points focaux. Donc, nous défendons les valeurs démocratiques, les droits humains et la bonne gouvernance à travers le numérique. Nous menons et pilotons des projets de développement et d'implication citoyenne dans les dispositifs démocratiques. Donc, je vais vous lister les activités que nous comptons mettre en œuvre dans le cadre de ce projet. Les activités. Nous en avons 5 activités. La première activité, c'est le guichet
unique. Le guichet unique est une plateforme web destinée à la société civile qui centralise les informations sur les élections et les processus électoraux en Afrique. Donc les pays cibles sont identifiés chaque année. Ce sera notre première activité. La seconde activité sera la cartographie des initiatives citoyennes en matière électorale. Comme son nom l'indique, on va cartographier des initiatives citoyennes. Donc les initiatives auront comme thème l'engagement citoyen, l'accès à l'information, la transparence, le monitoring citoyen, le cadre légal et le processus électoral. Donc ce que nous comptons faire, c'est cataloguer des initiatives, les mettre sur une plateforme afin d'encourager le partage d'expériences et d'apprentissage entre pairs. Donc c'est ça. Oui. Voilà, c'est ça la deuxième activité. Donc j'en ai fini avec la deuxième. La troisième activité, c'est l'école itinérante. L'école itinérante pour la société civile sur les processus électoraux en Afrique. Donc nous comptons mettre en place une école sur les processus en Afrique. Ce sera un MOOC, un programme de formation en ligne accessible à tous sur les processus électoraux, le leadership, le plaidoyer, entre autres. Donc on va organiser des séminaires pour repenser le rôle de la société civile dans les élections. Donc c'est ça, ce sera notre troisième activité. Pour notre quatrième activité, nous allons mettre en place un laboratoire. Donc ce laboratoire va appuyer les initiatives citoyennes. On va aussi, dans le cadre de ce laboratoire, tenir un hackathon électoral qui va réunir les développeurs, les concepteurs, les experts en sécurité et les acteurs de la société civile afin de créer et d'améliorer des outils technologiques pour les processus électoraux. Notre dernière activité sera de donner des subventions aux initiatives Civic Tech. Donc on va appuyer les initiatives, on va les appuyer financièrement. Au-delà de les appuyer techniquement, on va aussi les appuyer financièrement. Et nous comptons, à la fin du projet Ahead Africa, au moins financer une cinquantaine d'initiatives. Donc, de façon ramassée, ce sont les 5 activités que nous comptons mener dans le cadre de ce projet. Vous l'avez constaté, toutes nos activités vont tourner autour des Civic Tech. Parce que nous sommes convaincus que les Civic Tech constituent un pilier important pour le renforcement de la démocratie et des processus électoraux en Afrique. Les Civic Tech aussi, avec les Civic Tech, on notera l'implication des jeunes dans l'implication des Civic Tech dans les élections permettra de mettre en œuvre le rôle et l'impact des technologies dans la promotion de la démocratie. Donc, de façon ramassée, ce sont les activités que nous comptons mener dans le cadre de ce projet. Merci de votre attention.
Merci, Fatou. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, there was just a snapshot of the project, just to let you understand what exactly we're trying to do and what we're trying to launch and what we're trying also to advocate, even if you're not part of the project, but indeed you're a civil society organization that we will probably end up working with in some ways or another. So if there are any questions, we are behind schedule, so we have 5 minutes if you have any curiosities. Otherwise, we will move to the next panel. Yes, Talala.
Thank you very much, Giovanna. Mine was just a question. I just wanted some clarity. You mentioned that the program is being implemented in the Western Africa region, or are you also going to expand to other regions? That was my first question. The other question, I also wanted to understand the scope or maybe the depth of the project in terms of you. I think the first presenter mentioned about supporting electoral reform processes. So I just wanted to understand whether the project is also going to be working with national institutions like electoral management bodies or legislative institutions, or you're just focusing on the CSOs that then link to these, that advocate for these electoral reforms in the countries. I just also wanted to understand that part. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Solomon. I work with Foster. I want to find out how you intend to work with civil society organizations, or how you expect civil society organizations to contribute to the activities you want to implement. Thank you.
Okay, I will reply to you, Tadala, and then I will pass the question to Joseph, the second one. So we do work in other regions. So if you saw from the video, we are working with 3 election observation networks. One is WION here from West Africa, but we have HEHORN, Eastern Horn of Africa Election Observation Network, and then ESNCA, which is the Electoral Support Network for Southern Africa. So these are the 3 regions we will work in. But the aim is also to expand that these 3 networks are part of a continental network, which is AFIONET, which is the African Network of Election Observers. And at the moment, they group these 3 regional organizations. But in the project, we're also trying to create or to group civil society in North Africa and Central Africa. So we aim that by the end of the project, we'll be able to have 5 citizen observer networks across the continent. We have started this work already, but it's a long way to go, so we'll see. And the second one was if we manage to work with election management bodies. So the answer is yes. So as partners in the project, we will mainly tackle regional and continental advocacy. And of course, we'll work with institutional actors, but we also aim to support civil society at national level that then will link up with these actors as well. But Joseph can give more details on this.
Thank you, Giovanna. So we intend to work with national stakeholders such as the EMBs, and the protocol is that definitely you have to link up with an institution that already exists in the country, because they can give you a broader overview of what is actually happening to guide your advocacy or your advocacy strategy. So definitely we will be having some engagements with EMBs or stakeholders in other countries, but definitely through our member organizations within those countries. And the other question was what support do we seek, or how are we expecting CSOs to contribute? Yeah, so although the focus is on electoral integrity, we cannot do it alone. Definitely, there might be other areas that we need CSOs who are also focused on that angle to come in to help. For instance, there's a sub-grant that they do give depending on the activity. Probably when it comes to disinformation, Cordia alone cannot do it. We have to link up with other organizations who are more focused on disinformation. You get it? So depending on the issue, that's when we link up with organizations that are more focused on those issues. So that's the first one, based on the issue. The other one is that when it comes to support, we have to reach out to other CSOs for us to have one voice, because when we have one voice, we will be able to advocate for what we want. So definitely, we cannot do it alone. We will reach out to other CSOs for their assistance. That we need. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, also because it's 5 minutes are over. So thank you, Joseph. Merci, Fatou. And so we'll move to the next panel now. So I'll call my colleague Santiago. And oh, there is a question. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentations. My name is Cynthia and I work with Parliamentary Network Africa, and we are very excited about this project because we also believe that we need to know how members of parliament are elected into office and the integrity of the whole process of their election. So to you, sir, I'd like to know how we as an organization can join Wayun Network. And pour madame, j'aimerais savoir si le TEC et tout se développe de ce que madame Vera a déjà dit. Elle a déjà dit que CDD aussi va développer un outil Civic Tech. J'aimerais savoir si c'est un peu différent ou bien c'est la même chose.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to know, does the organization exist in Ghana?
Yes, please.
Yes. So if it exists in Ghana, definitely you apply to join CODEO. Because in Ghana, CODEO is, let's say, the organization, when it comes to election observation, is currently made up of 42 organizations. So when we are a member of CODEO, definitely, automatically CODEO is a member of WION. So that gives you the privilege.
Okay, so we work in Ghana, but across the continent.
Yes.
So is it possible to join CODEO and WION?
So the way it is, your organization in Ghana will definitely join CODEO. When it comes to the other countries,
okay,
that's when we will link up with them based on the observation groups there.
Okay.
Sure. So for instance, in Nigeria, they have the broader organization, that's the TMG. That organization is made up of so many election observer groups. So they are also part of WION. So that's how we operate.
All right, that's noted. I was asking Madame if the civic tech tool that their organization is about to develop different from that which is being developed by CDD-Ghana, or is the same thing?
I think it's also for Joseph to say. Yeah. I think Vera, you
Both
referred to something else earlier, but
the project are you referring to?
The second question.
No, like which CDD program are you referring to?
The tool that you mentioned that will be developed to monitor elections with the Electoral Commission.
Okay, so that's, we are doing it in partnership with the PENS Plus Bytes. It's still in the process. So, Jerry, do you want to speak about it? And then you can also add on if it's something similar to what you are working on. So maybe you can have Jerry speak about it.
So her question, is she referring to the incident when it comes to elections or the transmission of results?
The incidents that we are setting up, and it's a tool to monitor. She mentioned something similar about what they are doing.
Then Jerry.
Okay, thank you. So I think in reference to what she said, it's more of startup broadly, but this is specific to the Ghana elections. So yeah, so we are developing a network analysis tool. We are doing a social media tracker, all focused on disinformation and how we maintain electoral integrity, information integrity in Ghana. But I think she's looking at a broader, that's what she mentioned about the hackathon, to look at other tools that will be used for civic tech engagement here.
So ours will be specific to the 2024 election and will have a duration. So the process leading up to, and as we set up to observe our observers on the field, we'll have an incident desk, we monitor what's going on in the election, some keywords to be flagged in the system when we see certain. So we'll set up some keywords notification and then track what the conversations are, what's the media reporting, what's on the field. So even though observers are looking at other things, they have an eye on other related issues that we have a big incident report. Also to be able to counter misinformation and disinformation, because sometimes the media have a way of reporting incident And then citizens want to hear from CODEO, so we don't want to leave that gap. And politicians also report incident based on what favors them more. So usually when it comes out like that, they want to find out what is CODEO saying. And we can't do that without some partnership and technology that Pence Plus Byte is more, has an expert in, so we are bringing other partners. I think we even will bring in other media persons to support. I know Media Foundation for West Africa has something they are looking at. Yesterday, some media professionals also mentioned City wants to track something like that. So I think it's going to expand more than, and Kojo is interested to bring on board other partners who are interested to use our incident decks to also verify some information. So, but later we can look at the beyond the 2024 election. What can we do? I think that's the question. So, Jerry, we can have a conversation that after 2024 election, maybe being proactive with the reforms, we can have such conversation beyond just the 2024 election and track over the years what we can do with that as well.
Yeah, so I think one of the speakers mentioned about the governance process being a continuum, just not focused on elections. And we've realized that this information affects governance, affects trust in the institutions. So beyond elections, we also look at post-elections interventions to see how we maintain the information integrity across the governance processes, what tools are available, for citizens to access the right source of information, fact-check information. And one of the key things that we also need to mention is how we pre-bank, we build a capacity of ordinary citizens to be able to pre-bank this information before it's spread around. But what we are doing now is we are looking across the whole disinformation spectrum. So who are the creators? How do we come in the middle? Looking at the platform, and also how do we, support the debunking of it as well. Thank you.
En fait, j'aimerais répondre un peu à sa question. Nous, ce que nous comptons faire, c'est de créer une plateforme web et après de collecter des initiatives citoyennes en rapport avec les élections et les mettre sur la plateforme à disposition de... Voilà, c'est ce que nous comptons faire. Merci.
Thank you. Okay, thank you both, and thank you for your interest. We'll go to the other session now on the role of youth engagement, and we'll hope keep the time and make it last half an hour so we can have lunch straight after, before the closing remarks. Thank you.
Okay, so now, good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me fine? Good afternoon. Right. So we're here to address an issue that was in the ECOSOCC Today event yesterday and Thursday, for those who were there, and that's about youth inclusion and the participation of young people in panels, which we didn't really have in the two-day event of the ECOSOCC. So we're here because, as it was already mentioned earlier today, this is the year of elections, and of course this is the case in Africa as well, and this is the case in Ghana at the end of 2024. So we're looking back on some of the recent elections in the African continent. We've had elections in Senegal, Liberia, Zambia a few years ago, and we're here to look at the impact of young people when they participate in elections. As a very young continent, young people in Africa hold the key to impact the elections. And we've seen that in the most recent elections in South Africa as well, where the opposition was able to mount a significant challenge to the incumbents. So here we have 3 panelists from different countries, so all different contexts. And here we are to exchange good practices and challenges that young people face in engaging with elections. So first over here we have Melissa Hamalambo, who is the Executive Director of the SADC Youth Network, Fabian Kobe, who is the founder and the CEO of Youth Leadership Parliament here in Ghana, and Abdulaziz Isse, who is the advocacy lead for Affectivist in Senegal. So here the objective is to reflect a bit on the barriers and the challenges and the opportunities that young people have in engaging in the elections in Ghana, taking lessons from other elections, and as well looking beyond to reflections of the wider African continent. So I guess we're going to start with Fabian with the Ghanaian context, given that we are in Accra, of course, and we have elections coming up in December. So Fabian, if you can start us off with the mic is over there. Can you just tell us from your experience, from your organization, from your platform, the challenges and the barriers you have identified in terms of finance, bureaucracy that young people face in engaging in elections, not just in voting, but also in as candidates, as observers, and in other roles. So go ahead, Fabian. Thank you.
Thank you, Santiago. Can I talk a little bit about Youth Parliament before I go into it? Okay. So good afternoon to everyone. So I'm from Youth Leadership Parliament. I'm the founder. Youth Leadership Parliament is a civil society organization that is focused on the leadership capacity building of young people through the creation of a model parliament and a model government. Since 2016, we've been in Ghana building the next generation of global leaders for Africa and across. I have always held the belief that Africa, and Ghana in particular, doesn't need money. What we need is capacity building and leadership that will transform our resources into the well-being of the people. And so a lot of our focus has been through developing these young people. So there are 4 leadership pathways where every year they apply to join as youth MPs for the 275 constituencies. We cover the 16 regions of Ghana. They also apply to join as youth ministers and youth presidents. And throughout a year of training, we take them through various capacity buildings, etc. We are very well affiliated and supported by the European Union. We are currently doing projects with the EU. We are also widely connected with 23 European countries under the Eden organization. And we have been able to build a lot of the leaders that are in the political space for young people. Today in Ghana, if you go to the universities, a lot of the SRC presidents, student leadership has come from us. We've elected, we've got NUC presidents that have come from Youth Leadership Parliament. We were behind the Ghana's youth president that was on TV, etc. So we are doing quite a lot, but we haven't done a lot of publicity that I think makes us all over the place, but we are doing quite great. So it's a pleasure to be here and to contribute to what is happening with young people's involvement, especially at the time when we are heading into the elections. There are many barriers that young people face. When you look at the trainings that we've had with young people and the capacity building we've given them, there is that passion and desire for them to go out there and be part of the political process. Unfortunately, one of the big barriers has to do with financing. Most of young people either are in school or unemployed. So their passion to become leaders is heavily restricted by the lack of funding to be able to execute either a campaign, advertising, printing basic flyers, even transporting themselves to certain locations within the constituency, etc. These are one of the initial barriers that we've noticed that young people face.
they are also faced with, the heavy financial, I would say, the financial and the monetization of our elections in Ghana. Today, elections in Ghana, because of how a lot of money goes into elections, that gives opportunity for those who want to take up political offices, immediately puts a barrier for somebody who has just graduated from university, brilliant, passionate, want to, solve problems in the community, want to make impact. They have no chance because, number one, they have to pay a lot of money to pick up forms. To be a parliamentary candidate for political parties today, I think it's about 10,000 to dole out to the political parties. The Electoral Commission has just announced presidential candidacy 100,000. Now, for someone who's just finished university, probably had a first job, will not be able to raise that amount of money to participate in this electoral process and get elected into any office. Okay, and so therefore, there's a huge barrier that has kept young people at the very bottom of the entire political process, and in Ghana, we term them foot soldiers. Okay, they remain foot soldiers until heavens open for them to get a godfather who will open a little window for you to get in there. Okay, and so these are some of the trending and ongoing financial challenges that happens. When you also look at the culture of our country in general, there is this mindset that young people must be seen and not be heard. Okay, so when you are young and you have what it takes to even solve a problem, you are not seen as fitting the concept of being able to deliver. Okay, so you tend to have someone who will finance you. Okay, so a lot of the young people that today I have in contact with and I know are doing quite well within the political space have financiers behind them. So once you get in there, there has to be a payback for the funding that they have received. Today, we all know, every young person, I know we have our university students with us. There is no university election that is not monetized. That money hasn't been poured in to support a student leader who wants to contest an election. And so there has been allegations of corruption that has been tagged with very young people who have just gotten elected to become SRC presidents, simply because money has to be paid back to somebody somehow. And that leader in integrity becomes corrupted because, financially, he is not alone. Somebody is behind them. Recently, I remember one SRC president was, a vote of no confidence was passed, kicked out of office. I don't want to mention the university's name, but I mean, if you are within the space, you know about these things. So there are huge financial barriers that young people are facing that either stops them from participating, and where they even get the opportunity to participate, their integrity is in question. Because being able to have financed and got it in there, that money comes from somewhere. Either from a mainstream political party that has nominated him to go, let's say, KNUST or University of Ghana, SRC, to be the president, so that that person can do advocacy for the political party and marshal the youth within the university campus for the umbrella or for the elephant, of the parties. And so once that money is put behind that person, nobody has a chance, And then there is also the question of vote buying. vote buying is a huge financial barrier that I have seen monies changing hands that will technically kick out any potential passionate, well-meaning young leader who wants to go into office and support their peers and create opportunities for the colleagues or the young people that he's seen around his community. The other person who has the money but just doesn't have a clue what to do, will win the day. Okay, regardless of his intention. When he's got the money, so then what then becomes a democracy? What then becomes the right of people to be able to elect people of their choice? Because somebody can come from nowhere and buy out everybody. Your vote will not count. Okay, so and we have seen that being done from the very top, and it has become an example for young people following. And I always use the university campuses because we play a lot on those grounds. KNUST, Speaker of Parliament, is my product. There's a lot of the leadership bench of the University Parliament come from Youth Leadership Parliament, University of Ghana. We've had a lot of them come to, and they share their experiences, how they managed to even get to these places, and how some of them have lost their bid to becoming, And then there is this barrier that comes from bureaucracy or institutions that will intimidate young people, to step aside because they are not from the establishment. Okay, so there's the question of, can a young person be independent, not necessarily affiliated to any political party, be able to win any election in Ghana? You have to be affiliated. It is so terrible that sometimes either the dean or the leadership of the university will call you to one side and tell you to step aside. If you don't step aside, you will not finish the university, with a smile on your face. I remember one gentleman who was the majority leader of Youth Leadership Parliament in 2021, potentially wanting to win the SRC presidency on KNUST campus. And we did everything to support him and all that. And after a while, every phone call I make through, he doesn't answer my call. So I was quite worried about him. And at a point, I sent someone to go and fish him out on campus. So we got hold of him, and he's actually left campus, and he's hiding somewhere with his campaign team, because he's been told to step aside, and he's determined not to step aside, but he feels that he's not safe on campus, so he has to leave campus and come from external onto campus and do what he has to do. Long story short, he stepped aside. He stepped aside because if he doesn't, and even that, he had to go and make a deal, so his university education doesn't get compromised and all that. And these are some of the institutional intimidation and barriers that happen. They are realities on the ground. So we have to look at how can we, fight these barriers, support young people to overcome these things. And I think that is why we're all here.
and we'll have a discussion on solutions that we can potentially look at supporting young people. And finally, on this, because I'm talking about financial barriers and the institutions. For the last 8 years, Youth Leadership Parliament has been more on the training of political leadership and its general leadership of young people. And I did my own research and I realized, and especially based on these financial barriers we are talking about, I noticed that if we don't build the financial capacity of young people and only focus on the leadership capacity, these young people are going nowhere. They will finish great ideas, great passion, you know, all that it takes for them to be good leaders, but because they don't have what it takes to finance themselves, they become compromised. So we introduce entrepreneurship. And so once every year, we have what we call the mini summit. We help them develop a business plan, identify a business model that they believe and they are passionate about to implement in their constituencies they represent. Because in the constituency, you can identify a business that you can actually, you know, implement. So you look at the issues of climate, you know, around green energy and green jobs and what have you. That you would develop a business plan, will help you register a business, you know, brand the business, have a website, so that by the time you are leaving YLP Ghana as a leader, you have a bag of something that you can start life with. Because it is the foundation of the corruption of young people who go into politics unemployed. Politics then becomes food on the table. Politics then becomes where you know, their integrity cannot be sustained because they walked in unemployed. It becomes everything for them. To walk away when they need to walk away is difficult because they walk away to nothing. And so the entrepreneurship aspect must come with political training. So much so that we are solving unemployment, we are helping young people to be financially independent so that when they go into political leadership, they don't think or feel that the only way to survive is find a loophole of procurement, inflating budgets, creating extra room so that he can have that 10% or 20% in there, you know, so that at the end, because a lot of them are worried that, look, if I don't find a way of stealing money, if I don't find a way of keeping some money aside, at the end of my term, I will remain, you know, financially challenged. I'll remain poor. So the fear of not being able to have, being able to have financial sustainability, it compromises them. But if they have a business, and that is why, you know, I believe that a lot of politicians should look at being able to sustain themselves before thinking about coming in to lead people when they don't even have a job, right? So I think that is pretty much what I can say for now, and we'll move the conversation forward.
Awesome, thank you, Fabian. I think that's a very comprehensive overview of the barriers that young people are facing, and also the bit of the side effects as well, I guess, more on the deeper level rather than the just superficial level of just it's expensive. Also, what it leads to when young people actually get elected into office. So turning a bit westwards, we're going to turn to Senegal and to Abdulaziz. I believe you're going to be speaking in French, so I would advise people to get a hold of their headsets while I ask the question. So Abdulaziz, you had elections in February, and it was a very in the end, and it was a very mediatized electoral process with an incumbent who was refusing to step aside. Then he backtracked. Then he tried to postpone the election. So a lot of development, and young people were very active, and in the end, they had a very big impact on the election result. So, in other words, what good practices can you share? What reflections can you share from that process, both for the people of Ghana? We have a few young people here from the University of Ghana. So what sort of reflections can you share from earlier this year?
Good morning, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. Je vais continuer en français. Bon, je me présente. Je suis Abdou Aziz Cissé. Je suis africain du Sénégal, comme le dit notre président Cheikh Fall. C'est toujours un plaisir d'être dans un pays africain, de partager avec des compatriotes des autres pays par rapport à nous, ce que nous avons fait au Sénégal, le travail qui a été réalisé par les organisations de la société civile, les jeunes, etc. etc. Bon, avant de répondre à la question de Santiago, je voudrais juste revenir sur le contexte de l'élection, comme il l'a dit. L'élection s'est passée après plusieurs soubresauts qui nous ont menés d'événement à événement. Et c'était quasi, je dirais, incertain que l'élection se tienne à la date où elle s'est tenue, le 24 mars dernier, parce qu'elle était censée se tenir initialement le 24 février, autant pour moi, mais le 3 février, le président Macky Sall a reporté l'élection. Et après, tout le monde est sorti. Tous les Sénégalais sont sortis dans la rue, la société civile. Il y avait eu une mobilisation venant de partout de la société, du pays de manière générale. Mais bien avant ce report et bien avant cette mobilisation, tout a commencé en 2021 avec le fait que le président Macky Sall, c'est vrai qu'il n'a jamais déclaré l'intention de faire un troisième mandat, mais vu ses actes en tant qu'acteur et observateur de la vie politique et sociétale de manière générale, il y a eu une mobilisation qui s'est passée afin de faire respecter l'article 27 de notre Constitution qui dit que nul ne peut faire plus de 2 mandats. Alors que lui, il était à son deuxième mandat. Et pour coordonner cette lutte-là, il y a eu une plateforme qui a été créée qui s'appelait Diamagun troisième mandat. C'est du Wolof, ça veut dire mieux vaut la paix qu'un troisième mandat. Une plateforme où Africtivist a joué un rôle très important parce que c'est nous qui nous chargeons de tout ce qui est plaidoyer numérique afin d'intéresser les citoyens, d'intéresser les jeunes à tout ce qui se faisait en matière de plaidoyer pour la démocratie, les droits humains et la gouvernance de manière générale. Et tout cela nous a mené au 3 juillet 2023. C'est le jour où le président Macky Sall, à travers un discours solennel, a dit qu'il ne fera pas un troisième mandat. Et ça, c'était une victoire de toute la société civile. Mais comme je l'ai dit, on est passé de soubresaut en soubresaut. Et le 3 février 2024, il a décidé de reporter l'élection. Et encore, la société civile est sortie pour encore se mobiliser, pour encore travailler ensemble, en synergie, afin de faire échec à cette tentative-là. Parce que j'ai parlé de la plateforme Diamagun troisième mandat, qui était seulement une plateforme avec des organisations de la société civile. Mais pour avoir un impact plus fort, nous avons décidé d'élargir la plateforme et de faire entrer les organisations politiques, les partis politiques dans cette lutte-là, parce que chacun de son côté a un rôle à jouer. Et cette plateforme-là a aussi mené à une autre plateforme qui s'appelle, toujours en Wolof, Aar Suñu élection, qui veut dire protéger notre élection. Donc, c'est ces différents soubresauts qui ont mené à la création de ces différentes plateformes. Donc, c'est le contexte qui détermine des fois la lutte et les stratégies qu'on doit mener pour lutter. Et lorsque le Conseil constitutionnel a décidé de donner une date pour tenir l'élection le 24 mars, là aussi c'était une victoire parce que entre-temps il y a eu un dialogue et durant ce dialogue il était décidé que l'élection se tienne le 2 juin. Et le président Macky Sall, après avoir demandé avis au Conseil constitutionnel, le Conseil constitutionnel a dit que l'élection ne doit pas se tenir le 2 juin, l'élection doit se tenir entre le 2 juin et la tenue du dialogue en tant que tel, et a décidé de donner une date. Et c'est à cette date-là que s'est tenue l'élection présidentielle qui a vu la victoire au premier tour du président actuel Bassirou Diomaye Faye avec plus de 54%. Donc ça, c'est une lutte qui a abouti et c'est un succès, mais c'est un succès qui ne sort pas de nulle part, parce qu'il y a eu un travail au préalable qui a été fait par la société civile depuis des années afin de promouvoir la participation citoyenne de manière générale. Et maintenant, je m'en vais peut-être répondre à la question de Santiago sur les bonnes pratiques que nous, au niveau du Sénégal, pouvons partager à partir de la mobilisation qu'on a eue lors des récentes élections. Je vais commencer par prêcher pour ma chapelle. Je dirais l'utilisation des civic tech à bon escient. Lorsque je dis à bon escient, c'est aussi de combattre, de contrer le mauvais côté des choses. J'y reviendrai. Parce que le civic tech nous permet de toucher les jeunes de manière plus massive. L'utilisation de ces civic tech dans nos différents pays permettra de faciliter et d'être plus efficace dans le plaidoyer pour plus de participation citoyenne dans les processus électoraux de manière spécifique. Juste pour vous donner quelques chiffres de Data Reportal qui ont été... Data Reportal, c'est un rapport sur le Internet de manière générale dans le monde, mais pour le Sénégal, il y a 10 millions d'utilisateurs d'Internet au Sénégal, sur une population de 18 millions. Donc, ce qui veut dire 20,6% de la population. Il y a 3,71 millions d'utilisateurs des réseaux sociaux. Il y a 21,92 millions de connexions mobiles cellulaires, ce qui équivaut à 121,8% de la population. Donc, c'est pour vous montrer l'importance d'utiliser les civic tech afin de promouvoir la participation citoyenne. Facebook seulement a 3,35 millions d'utilisateurs au Sénégal. X, anciennement Twitter, a 200 000 utilisateurs au Sénégal, juste rien qu'au début de l'année de 2024. Ça montre l'importance, l'acuité d'utiliser les civic tech pour intéresser les jeunes, intéresser les citoyens de manière générale à ce qui se fait et à promouvoir la participation citoyenne dans nos différents pays. J'ai aussi regardé pour le Ghana. Pardon. J'ai aussi regardé pour le Ghana. Le Ghana, sur une population de 34 millions, si je ne me trompe pas, il y a 24 millions d'utilisateurs d'Internet. Donc, l'Internet est un levier qui doit être utilisé, peut-être que je prêche des convaincus, qui doit être utilisé pour accélérer cette participation citoyenne, accélérer l'implication des jeunes dans les processus électoraux et aussi dans le processus électoral qui se passe actuellement ici au Ghana pour l'élection présidentielle de décembre 2024. Il y a plus de 7 millions d'utilisateurs de Facebook et 1 million d'utilisateurs de Twitter. Donc il faut utiliser toutes ces données-là. Je pense que on en a parlé durant le forum citoyen de ECOSOCC. Les données sont des ressources, sont la ressource la plus précieuse actuellement dans le monde. Donc il faut utiliser ces données-là d'être plus efficace, notre plaidoyer pour la démocratie. Il faut aussi travailler en synergie. Monsieur Fabian parlait tout à l'heure de tout ce qui est engagement politique ou participation politique des jeunes. Toutes ces actions-là ne peuvent pas se faire isolément. Il faut travailler en synergie afin d'être efficace, afin de voir notre voix être portée. L'autre aspect, c'est de démocratiser l'information. Il faut rendre l'information accessible. Tous les contenus à la base. Il faut intéresser tout le monde, de la vendeuse d'arachide aux marchands ambulants. Au Sénégal, c'est ce travail-là qui a été fait, le fait d'intéresser toutes les couches de la sur ce qui se passe au pays. Il y avait des discussions partout, au marché, partout, parce qu'il y a un travail qui se fait pour montrer à tout le monde que la marche du pays doit intéresser tous les Sénégalais. Et il faut aussi reconnaître le leadership. C'est très important. J'ai parlé du Conseil constitutionnel. Bon, il y a eu beaucoup de critiques par rapport au Conseil constitutionnel au Sénégal depuis l'arrivée de Macky Sall au pouvoir, etc. Mais lorsque le moment est venu de soutenir le rôle que doit jouer le Conseil constitutionnel, de reconnaître la légitimité du Conseil constitutionnel en matière électorale, tous les citoyens ont fait du plaidoyer, ont reconnu ce rôle-là et ont aussi montré que le Conseil constitutionnel est le seul organe légitime en matière électorale au Sénégal. Donc il faut reconnaître le leadership des institutions, mais aussi des acteurs, des personnalités. Parce qu'il y a des personnalités au Sénégal qui, lorsqu'elles parlent autant pour moi de tout ce qui est élection, tout ce qui est démocratie, tout ce qui est bonne gouvernance, elles sont écoutées, elles sont suivies, parce que leur voix porte et elles portent une légitimité. Donc il faut reconnaître le leadership, parce que pour avoir gain de cause dans ce genre de combat-là, il faut qu'il y ait un leadership, quelqu'un qui mène, et les autres puissent faire le travail aussi de leur côté. Il faut aussi développer une résilience commune. Lorsque je parle de développer une résilience, c'est le fait de savoir que la victoire, le combat, c'est quelque chose de très dur. Et aussi, ce n'est pas un long chemin fleuve tranquille. C'est-à-dire, des fois il y a des défaites, des fois on tombe, des fois on se lève, mais il faut toujours se battre et savoir que la victoire sera au bout de tout ce combat-là, parce que c'est un combat qui intéresse tout le monde, c'est un combat qui est mené par tout le monde. Donc il faut être résilient et aussi développer cette résilience. Pour revenir toujours dans le cas de mon pays, il y a eu plus d'une quarantaine de morts de 2021 à 2024. Il y a eu une quarantaine de morts. Et les citoyens n'ont jamais baissé les bras, ils ont toujours continué à se battre pour ceux-là qui sont tombés. C'est-à-dire, il ne faut pas que ceux qui sont morts soient morts en vain. Donc il faut continuer à se battre afin que l'idéal pour lequel ils se battent soit réalisé un jour. C'est pour ça que le combat a été continué par presque toutes les couches de la société, comme je l'ai dit tantôt, parce que chacun a un rôle à jouer de son côté. Il faut aussi combattre la désinformation et les fake news. Ça aussi c'est très important. Moi je me rappelle dans l'un des moments les plus forts de la contestation. Comme vous le savez, au Sénégal, il y a, je dirais pas sentiment de France, il y a une contestation de la France et de tout ce qui est relations franco-afrique. Mais il y a certains aussi qui comment dire, qui utilisent cette contestation-là pour faire avancer des idées. Il y a eu des manifestants qui ont essayé de manifester avec le drapeau de la Russie. Et le drapeau a été brûlé sur le champ par un autre manifestant. Et ça a été publié sur les réseaux. Mais ceux qui ont publié ces séquences-là ont été bruyamment interpellés sur les réseaux afin de supprimer ces tweets-là. Parce que ça délégitime le rôle, ça délégitime la lutte qui est en train d'être menée par le peuple et qui peut être utilisée pour d'autres fins. Donc c'est très important aussi ce combat-là qu'on doit mener pour la désinformation et les fake news. Bon, je m'en arrête là pour le moment. Je pense que durant la discussion, on pourra revenir sur certains points par rapport à tout ce qui a été évoqué. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Abdulaziz. So thank you very much. I think there's quite a lot of lessons there for civil society. Maybe more turning to the lessons for public authorities and for governments. So Melissa, if you can tell us a bit about your experience in Zambia in the elections in 2021 and since, in terms of the good practices that civil society has and that they can pass on to public authorities to be replicated. So go ahead.
Thank you very much, Santiago, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for ensuring that I don't leave this country without speaking. Both Giovanna and Santiago insisted that I sit on this panel today. I want to start by reacting to Fabian and Abdu's sharing today, and maybe just giving a bit of context from Southern Africa and Zambia in particular. For the Zambian case scenario 2021, we did observe that elections are won by independent candidates, people who are not backed by political parties. Now the question we ask is how and why do they manage to win elections? We now have a parliament that has roughly 10 independent members of parliament. We believe that what worked for these members of parliament is working and being with their communities. So even if the political party did not adopt them, did not give them that nomination, they were still able to garner the support of their communities. And when communities decide that this is the person we want to serve us, they will definitely vote for you. So my work is mainly concentrated on working with political parties and young people in the political parties. We also work around advocacy for policy and legal reforms to ensure that our environment suits the needs of young people and that young people are able to meaningfully participate in our governance. I also want to agree with Fabian and Abdul on both practices and challenges. And I was sitting here in the morning and listening to the keynote speech and saying, wow, African problems are the same. When it comes to dealing with elections, trusting the electoral management bodies, whether you're in West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, it's practically the same issues that we are dealing with. One other key area I want to react to is the challenge of financing of elections for young people. This is one challenge that has been sung and sung and sung and sung and sung, and we could sit here all day and talk about financing. But we are trying to shift the conversation to what can you do as a young person? You know that your electoral cycle, you have an election in the next 4 or 5 years. What are you working on? How are you yourself supporting yourself to build those finances or to build part of those finances to get you to stand for that position and serve people? So for the Zambia and Malawi young politicians who I work with, we are trying to shift the conversation to what can you do? And I was very happy when Fabian spoke about entrepreneurship. Now we are also taking it a step further to say financial literacy. Do you understand how to use your money and where to place your money? If you know you want to run for a position in the next 5 years, why not start now to save? Why not start now to invest? Why not start now to contribute to your own electoral campaign so that you're not subject to the will of the adults, sugar daddies, blessers, and then we continue the cycle of complaining post an election that, oh, ABCD bribed me, or ABCD wanted to meet me in a lodge and I couldn't, and that's how I was not nominated. So yes, the fees are high, yes, the cost is there, but what can we do aside complaining and repeatedly talking about the challenge? And that's where we're trying to take the conversation. So coming back to how our governments and how public institutions can best improve or learn from the practices of civil society in ensuring that there are proper electoral reforms and elections are managed well. One of the areas that we worked on as civil society in Zambia during the 2021 general election is meeting the people where they are. Abdul spoke about using organizations like the one I ran to amplify the message around voter education and give the right information to young people and to the general citizenry. We also went into the communities to work with people where they were. We had very innovative strategies of going into fields. If you find people are working in a field, instead of you pulling them out of that field, go and join them and speak to them where they are, so that you do not create that expectation of, you've pulled me from my work, I have listened to you, now you need to pay me because you've taken me away from making my income. We went into markets, we went into bus stations to give the information that government was initially publishing through the electoral management body around voter education and how the processes are going to run, what stage is coming, when are campaigns coming, what should the political parties do, what should you expect from your parties and your leaders. So I think any electoral management body and any public authority should always consider starting early and meeting the people where they are. We also worked around ensuring that our material and information was well translated into local languages so that the people understood and we met them in a language that made sense to them. So elections are usually, well, they tend to be very elitist, if my opinion. It's everything will be in English. Those in the urban areas will understand. When you take it to the rural areas, it becomes a bit tricky to expand and explain. So young people, civil society organizations coordinated themselves, formed partnerships. I live in Lusaka, which is an urban area, and I'm not going to go into a rural area to implement, but we worked with organizations in the rural areas to share the information, ensure that it's translated, and then they excuse me, did the work of disseminating it to the communities. The last practice that I'd like to share is that institutions, public institutions, must begin to reach out to civil society. We did a lot of reaching out to the public institutions, and it would be good going forward that the reverse is done in good time so that funds are put to the correct areas where there is actual need and interventions are not rushed. There's a trend of having money thrown at elections a year before an election. And that just throws things into disarray. Everyone is running around like headless chickens trying to get things done and getting very little done. So my hope is that going forward, public institutions, funders, donors, any institution that supports elections in our different countries are able to start early, start soon. We all know elections, the actual voting day, most of our constitutions have given directives on when elections happen. So it's not like we wake up today, tomorrow and say, oh, we're going to have an election. So I think it's very important to start planning. It's important to start having these conversations early on in the cycle.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Melissa, and thank you very much to the panelists. It would have been great as well to continue with the conversation between you three. I think you have a lot of exchanges to have, a lot of similarities as well. So the civic tech argument that Abdulaziz was talking is now relevant as well to the work that Fabian will be carrying out, who's just starting to get a bit into the civic tech area just now, right? So we'll just have a bit of time for questions from the audience. 5 minutes, so maybe not enough questions. Okay, so we can take a few questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So my question is to Melissa. I'm sorry if I didn't get your name well. Okay, so I was interested in the part where you were saying some independent candidates are winning elections by engaging the communities. I'm particularly interested in that part because we have in our country where some people go independent, they engage the people very well, but our political system is so polarized that people say even if you give them t-shirts, they'll vote for you. So in such cases, with the experience from where you are coming from, how do you deal with that to ensure that you don't have to necessarily align, but you can engage the communities and still win elections? Thank you.
Thank you. Since I already have the mic, thank you. Thank you. So, the panelists have raised issues, particularly concerning the monetization of politics and its exclusionary effect on the youth and also on women. I mean, the CDD study that was done, I was the leader of the team that did the study. And then we did a similar one in Zambia. If you look at the cost of politics running for MP across Africa, you know that the problems are the same. So for example, in Kenya, to be an MP, you would have to spend about 300,000 United States dollars. In Uganda, you have to spend 136,000 US dollars. Malawi, smaller population, so you go off with 36,700. Sierra Leone, up to about 100,000 US dollars. Zambia, and I was part of the study that did this study in Zambia with Transparency International and NDI, $131,000. We've already mentioned Ghana's own. So the youth cannot compete in this. So what you need to do is to use legislation. The filing fees that have to be paid, you substitute that with signatures. Okay? Campaign finance regulation, in Ghana, there's no campaign finance regulation. And that's one of the agendas that we'll be pushing. So across Africa, filing fees, for example, at both the EMB level and the party level, you have to substitute that with signatures. The other thing to do is that when you have campaign finance legislation, the state uses it to regulate the parties. So for example, in Kenya, where the state allocates a certain percentage of GDP to financing political parties, there are regulations in there which require that parties that receive such public funding will be required to fill a certain number of youth, women candidates as well. So those are some of the dynamics, because when it comes to money, the youth cannot compete. So you use legislation to address these issues. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. I want to direct this question to Fabi and Kobe. You were talking about there is a lot of vote buying and all of that in politics, and even in student politics. As somebody who ran for SRC, I was not successful, but I'm currently Speaker of the University of Ghana Parliament House. I believe that no one buys what is not sold. The votes are for sale. That is why it is being bought by whoever that is buying them. Yeah. So most of the times when we are talking, the focus is on vote buying, but we shift the attention from the vote selling, which I think should be critically addressed. And then secondly, talking about youth participation in elections, especially we are in here, I believe that one of the problems that is also, or one of the causes, is the break of trust that the politicians that we give the power to have brought to us. Because as a political science student, you know, John Locke speaks about fiduciary responsibility, which we give to politicians. But these politicians come, this fiduciary responsibility, they break the trust that we give them. Therefore, as a young person, I'm not motivated to go and join a queue to vote for someone who break that same trust that I'm giving the person. We're in this country when a member of parliament abandoned a responsibility as the representative of the people and then was living life elsewhere. How do you expect a young person to go and queue to vote for another person who is not, who no one knows what the person is also coming to do? So most of the times we tend to blame young people, but the people that we give the power to, they are not being like responsible and being thoughtful about the people that give the power to them enough. And then lastly, on campus politics, I'm one person who has engaged or is engaged in student politics for some time now on the University of Ghana campus. Your speech or whatever you said about the involvement of political parties in student politics is not far from the truth. Whenever there is student election, you see the NPP coming to, you know, poach or support one candidate over the other because they believe that when this person wins election, the person can be able to, you know, lead or advocate for the interest of that particular political party. I believe it is high time CSOs developed strategic plan to actually have interest in campus politics. We shouldn't leave it for the politicians. We shouldn't leave it that, oh, it is politics, so we should leave it for TESCON, we should leave it for test chat, and then the NDC and NPP should have their thing. Because I see the probability of the future of campus leadership and governance being mortgaged by these political parties. And then if we don't take care, we'll still come to this program, we'll go to different roundtable, and we'll discuss the same issues over and over, and there will be no solution to them. So we have to really look at this very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all the brilliant questions, interventions. Oh, we have a last one, sorry.
Well, thank you very much. My name is Henry Mensah. I represent Youth Path Organization. My question is directed to Mr. Fabian. He indicated about monetization in our political spaces, and I want to ask, what can we do to prevent monetization, especially in our student politics? Because as he indicated, we've seen in student elections, we've seen people, how the two major political parties influence students and what have you. What can we do to also prevent this kind of politics, or the two major political parties interfering in student politics? And finally, what are the process one will have to go through to enter youth in parliament?
Thank you very much. He just handed it over to me. Last one. So it's about vote buy. When we did the CDD study in 2022, we saw the interplay of demand and supply. Voters demand these gifts and goods from the politicians. The politicians have to supply it by using their own money and the financiers. When the financiers give them the money, these guys get into office, they have to recoup. Current law criminalizes vote buying in public elections, and public elections are presidential election, elections for MP and all of that. It does not criminalize vote buying in intra-party elections. So part of the campaign financing regime, which Ghana will have to come up with, which CDD has provided some insight, is to criminalize vote buying in intra-party elections. At the student level, the universities will have to develop those sort of codes that they would use to ensure whether the state should go all the way to the universities to regulate campaigns and financing and all of that, to criminalize it, or that they would implement some measures which will address some of these issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It seems that we might be running into the next session, the next event in this room, so we might have to wrap it up. So can I ask the panelists to have quick reactions to the questions, maybe 3-4 minutes each, max? So we'll start backwards, so Melissa, you go ahead first.
Thank you so much for your question. I want to just start by giving you a bit of context again. Most of the independent candidates who won their seats were actually in a party before they went independent. So their parties did not adopt them, and they chose to adopt candidates who threw money at the system, but the people voted for the candidates they wanted. So that's how they went independent. So it is possible to be independent and not aligned to a political party and win a seat. The practice, the trend from 2021 for us has shown us that it's possible. I also want to react to the comment around legislation, which I heavily agree with. It's one of the strategies that we need to actively push forward to ensure. Can you hear me? Yes. To ensure that young people are able to find themselves in these leadership positions, they're able to run for elections, and we curb the issue of having when it comes to running for an election. So for Zambia, we are currently undergoing electoral reforms and conversations underway. I'm part of a coalition of organizations that is pushing forward a mixed member electoral system for Zambia, which is also looking at campaign financing and having a law around managing political parties and ensuring that political parties are able to have women, persons with disabilities, and young people as candidates. So 100% agree that it takes legislation to ensure that some of these requirements are mandatory and that political parties adhere to them.
Yes, thank you. Reacting to question from University of Ghana student on the demand and supply that has to do with monetization of elections and vote buying. I think that is a chicken and egg situation. If you have something you're selling and there's no buyer, it kills the seller, you know, in the business. And so it's a chicken and egg situation. But honestly, I put a lot of, I would deal with the youth a lot more, and I think that politicians will always want to influence because they have the power, they have the money. But if young people get to the point where they say no, look at what happened in Kenya. The youth on the street, do you think they didn't belong to political parties? They were, some of them were even members of the incumbent, members of the party of the incumbent. But when they said no is no, they stood against their own president. You understand? So young people must get to the point where in the midst of lack, poverty, struggle, they would take a stand to bring change. But I have seen a lot of the young people that have been with me always looking for the comfort that comes with participation. You invite them for this event, they will ask you, what is at stake? You know, are we item 30? You know what I mean? So there's a lot young people must actually try and elevate themselves above. And it will put politicians in a very difficult position. Why should a t-shirt attract you to make a decision? Why should 20 cedis and 50 cedis be enough to make you change your mind on who you want to vote for? That is less than like $2 or, you know, $3. I just came from, I was in the UK when we recently had elections and Labour won the elections. You know, I left my office and went to vote. You understand? And the whole time when campaigning was going on and, you know, Sunak was trying to maintain his, look, there was no noise, but campaigning was going on. you will not be able to influence any young person with money. Now, the reason I think being that, and I mentioned that in my earlier submission, that we need to empower young people to be financially sustainable. If you have a job, if you have an income, if you can put food on the table, at least for a day, take care of the basics that you need in life. These monies will not attract you to be able to make a decision. And so CSOs, in our support and our engagement with young people, we must look at empowering them. And I think mentioned financial literacy, which is very critical, and entrepreneurship, which I think is very important. And then to what my senior colleague said about the law that must be put in place, to create room. Look, if you want to stand for an MP in the UK, all you need to do is get 10 people in the community to sign, and have lived in the community for 3 years. That's it. That's it. So thank you very much. And let's have a chat on how to join Youth Leadership Parliament after this session because of the time. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Bon, je vais faire un bref commentaire. Moi, je pense qu'il s'agit plus d'une question de... C'est bon pour tout le monde. Je pense que c'est plus une question de système, de cadre, plutôt de personnes ou d'individus. Par exemple, au Sénégal, bon, c'est le contexte que je maîtrise le mieux, on ne peut pas être candidat sans avoir le récépissé d'un parti politique. Je dirais ça de manière triviale. C'est pour dire que à la base, on était censé combattre ou contester un système, un cadre, mais in fine, on finit par s'embarquer dans ce cadre-là, dans ce système-là, et on nourrit la bête ou la machine. Donc, juste pour dire que y a quelqu'un qui l'a dit, ça fait longtemps qu'on a ces genres de discussions-là, et c'est très bien de les avoir dans un cadre régional ou continental, mais les recommandations qui sont données, qui sont transmises autant pour moi, on doit faire des plaidoyers afin qu'elles soient respectées et qu'elles soient mises en œuvre par nos différents pays. Sinon, cela ne va pas changer. On va revenir pour discuter peut-être des mêmes sujets. Donc c'est très 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 important après de faire des plaidoyers au niveau des institutions nationales, régionales ou continentales. Et je pense que ECOSOCC qui nous a réunis ici fait un travail exceptionnel par rapport à tout cela. Et il y a beaucoup d'autres organes aussi de l'Union africaine qui font un travail intéressant par rapport à l'implication de la société civile dans les différentes, je dirais, activités de l'Union et de manière générale dans les différents pays, dans les différents États membres de l'Union africaine. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I believe you're going to be giving some closing remarks. Can we get one last round of applause for our three panelists? Thank you very much. And we also encourage you to continue your reflections during lunch, correct? Okay, and then back to Giovanna.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists. I will invite Aisha to give a closing remark. Couple of minutes we have before going for lunch, and just because I'm here already, give you some instructions. So the lunch will be at the first floor, so you will have to go through the main hallway, and then you will find a staircase, and it's the room just on your left when you're on the first floor. Over to Aisha.
Thank you, Giovanna, and thank you all for being here today with us. And the lesson learned, the contributions, what ahead Africa is trying to do, it just shows that there is need for collaboration, There is need to continue building coalitions, and there is need to continue to learn from each other. We've seen since this morning that there are many similarities between the different countries of the issues, even though the context might be different, but we are still facing similar problems of our democracies. And as countries, we might be at different levels of our democracy. Ghana is considered as one of the most democratic countries on the continent. It has its issues, Senegal as well, Zambia, every African country actually, and we have those that are going through crisis right now. Close actually, I want to, because we are in Ghana, and there's a quote by Nkrumah that I identify with, is Africa was born in me, and I just feel when I come to Ghana, I experience and live that. And thank you for the food, thank you for the smiles and the joy that we see when interacting with Ghanaians. Thanks to CDC, CDD for hosting us. And there's another quote I want to mention from Nkrumah, is the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the total liberation of Africa. We are in a different context now, and we are still struggling to liberate ourselves. It's no longer necessary from colonizers. It has to do with system building. What kind of democracy each country wants to have? We need to have democracies that reflect the aspirations and hope of our people. We need to stop copying and pasting. We need to have more interactions with our people. They know what they want. When we adopt a system or an approach, we have to explain it and localize it, because we've had so many kingdoms on the continent with so many interesting approaches that we can learn from. Let's look back. We have everything we need. It's not just resources. We have everything we need, apart from the mineral resources. We have the human capacity. We have the natural resources. It's just the will. And seeing coalitions or setups like this one actually gives hope. So let's continue. Even though the struggle is difficult, stressful, let's not lose hope. And with that, I would want to declare officially launched the Ahead Africa project. Thank you, everyone. So we can now go and have some banku. I hope there is banku.